The story of the Phoenicians begins not with a sudden emergence, but through a gradual transformation of Bronze Age Canaanite settlements along the eastern Mediterranean coast. Archaeological excavations at Byblos reveal continuous occupation dating back to the 4th millennium BC, with layers of pottery, tools and architectural remains demonstrating the steady evolution from Neolithic fishing communities to sophisticated urban centres. The site's stratigraphy shows clear cultural continuity, with each successive layer building upon the previous one, while incorporating new technologies and trade goods from distant lands. At Byblos, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of early contact with Egypt as far back as 3000 BC. Egyptian artefacts found in Bronze Age contexts include alabaster vessels, gold jewellery, and hieroglyphic inscriptions that speak to established trade relationships. The famous Byblos syllabic script, discovered on bronze spatulas and stone monuments, represents one of the earliest attempts to adapt writing systems for local use. These inscriptions, dating to around 1800 to 1600 BC, demonstrate how Canaanite populations were already developing distinct cultural practices while maintaining connections to major regional powers. The transformation of these coastal settlements into recognisably Phoenician cities occurred gradually throughout the Late Bronze Age. Tyre's archaeological record shows significant expansion during the 15th–13th centuries BC, with massive stone foundations supporting multi-storey buildings and sophisticated harbour installations. The city's famous purple dye industry appears in the archaeological record through enormous accumulations of murex shells, some deposits reaching several metres in height. Chemical analysis of these shells confirms intensive processing activities, with evidence of organised workshops and standardised production techniques that would later become synonymous with Phoenician commerce. Sidon's excavations reveal similar patterns of growth and specialisation. The city's metalworking quarter, identified through concentrations of copper slag, bronze implements and furnace remains, demonstrates advanced technological capabilities by 1400 BC. Imported tin from as far away as Cornwall and Afghanistan found in Sidonian contexts indicates participation in extensive trade networks that spanned the known world. The discovery of standardized weights and measures at the site suggests sophisticated commercial practices that facilitated long-distance exchange. The emergence of distinctive Phoenician identity cannot be separated from their maritime adaptation. Unlike their inland Canaanite cousins, who remained primarily agricultural, the coastal populations developed increasingly sophisticated seafaring capabilities. Harbour installations at major sites show progressive improvement in design and scale. At Tyre, underwater archaeology has revealed massive stone blocks forming breakwaters and quays that could accommodate vessels of considerable size. These harbour works required coordinated labour and significant investment, indicating centralised authority and economic specialisation. The development of Phoenician shipbuilding technology drew upon centuries of coastal navigation experience. Archaeological evidence from shipwrecks dating to the Late Bronze Age shows vessels constructed with cedar planks joined by mortise and tenon joints, a technique that provided both flexibility and strength for open sea navigation. The famous cedar ship of Iluburan, dating to around 1300 BC, though not definitively Phoenician, demonstrates the type of vessel and cargo typical of Eastern Mediterranean maritime trade. Its diverse cargo included copper ingots from Cyprus, tin from Central Asia, amber from the Baltic, and luxury goods from across the known world. The transition from Bronze Age Canaanite city-states to seafaring commercial centres accelerated during periods of political instability in the great empires. When Egyptian control over the Levant weakened during the late 19th and 20th dynasties, coastal cities gained greater autonomy. This independence allowed them to develop their own diplomatic and commercial relationships. Correspondence found in the Amarna archives reveals that by the 14th century BC, rulers of cities like Byblos were conducting semi-independent foreign policy, while nominally remaining Egyptian vassals. Mesopotamian influences on developing Phoenician culture appear throughout the archaeological record. Cylinder seals, cuneiform tablets, and Mesopotamian-style pottery found at Phoenician sites indicate regular contact with Babylonian and Assyrian merchants. The adoption of certain religious practices, architectural techniques, and administrative systems from Mesopotamia helped shape the distinctive synthesis that characterized mature Phoenician civilization. However, these influences were selectively adopted and adapted to local conditions rather than wholesale cultural replacement. The Hittite Empire's expansion into Syria during the Late Bronze Age brought another major influence to bear on Phoenician development. Hittite texts mention tribute payments from coastal cities, indicating formal recognition of Hittite suzerainty. Archaeological evidence of Hittite influence includes distinctive pottery styles, metallurgical techniques, and architectural elements found at Phoenician sites. The collapse of Hittite power around 1200 BC created another opportunity for increased Phoenician autonomy and expansion of their maritime activities. Egyptian relationships with the emerging Phoenician cities were particularly complex and long-lasting. Egyptian texts from the Middle Kingdom period describe regular expeditions to obtain cedarwood from the Lebanese mountains, with Byblos serving as the primary port for this trade. The Egyptian name for Byblos, Kepen, became synonymous with high-quality wood and shipbuilding materials. Egyptian officials stationed at Phoenician ports oversaw these transactions, creating sustained cultural contact that influenced both civilizations. The tribute relationships between Phoenician cities and major empires were rarely simple subjugation. Archaeological evidence suggests these arrangements often resembled commercial partnerships, with tribute payments representing the cost of protection and market access rather than pure exploitation. Egyptian scarabs found in Phoenician contexts often bear the names of local rulers alongside Egyptian royal cartouches, suggesting recognized status within imperial hierarchies. Similarly, Mesopotamian texts describe Phoenician cities as allied or friendly, rather than conquered territories. Cultural exchanges resulting from these imperial relationships profoundly shaped Phoenician society. Egyptian influence appears in religious iconography, with local deities adopting attributes of Egyptian gods. The goddess Astarte, central to Phoenician religion, incorporated elements from Egyptian Isis and Hathor. Mesopotamian influences are visible in legal practices, with Phoenician law codes showing similarities to Babylonian precedents. These cultural borrowings were not passive adoption but active synthesis, creating distinctly Phoenician interpretations of foreign concepts. The geographic constraints of the Levantine coast fundamentally shaped Phoenician development. The narrow coastal plain, rarely exceeding 30 kilometers in width, limited agricultural expansion and encouraged urban concentration. The Lebanon mountains, rising abruptly from the coast, provided valuable timber resources but created barriers to inland expansion. This geographic compression forced populations to look seaward for opportunities and resources unavailable in their limited hinterland. The coastline itself, with its natural harbours and offshore islands, provided ideal conditions for maritime development. Tyre's position on a defensible island connected to the mainland by a narrow causeway offered security while maintaining access to coastal resources. Sidon's harbour, protected by natural breakwaters, could accommodate large fleets while providing shelter from Mediterranean storms. These geographic advantages were enhanced through human engineering, with successive generations improving harbour facilities and expanding urban areas through land reclamation projects. The cedar forests of the Lebanese mountains represented perhaps the most valuable natural resource available to the Phoenicians. These forests provided timber for shipbuilding that was unmatched in quality throughout the ancient world. Cedarwood's resistance to decay and insect damage made it ideal for maritime construction, while its aromatic properties gave it religious and luxury value. Control of cedar resources provided Phoenician cities with a monopoly that ensured their integration into regional trade networks and diplomatic relationships. The concentration of population in coastal cities rather than dispersed agricultural settlements created unique social and economic conditions. Urban density fostered craft specialization, with entire neighborhoods devoted to specific industries. The purple dye workshops of Tyre, the metalworking quarters of Sidon, and the timber processing facilities of Byblos created concentrated expertise that enhanced productivity and quality. This urban concentration also facilitated the development of complex social hierarchies, with merchant classes gaining prominence alongside traditional warrior elites. Maritime orientation fundamentally altered Phoenician social structures compared to their inland neighbours. Success in sea trade required different skills and resources than agricultural production or territorial conquest. Navigation knowledge, commercial networks, and shipbuilding expertise became sources of wealth and power. Families controlling these resources formed new elite classes whose interests often differed from traditional landed aristocracies. This maritime focus created more flexible and adaptive social structures capable of responding to changing commercial opportunities. The development of standardized weights, measures, and currency systems reflects the practical requirements of extensive maritime commerce. Archaeological finds show remarkable consistency in weight standards across Phoenician sites, facilitating trade relationships across vast distances. The adoption of precious metal standards for large transactions, evidenced by hoards of silver ingots and jewellery, provided the flexibility needed for international commerce. These commercial innovations would later influence monetary systems throughout the Mediterranean world. The collapse of Bronze Age empires around 1200 BC created unprecedented opportunities for the coastal Canaanite cities to assert their independence and develop the distinctive political structures that would define Phoenician civilization. The withdrawal of Egyptian garrisons, the fragmentation of Hittite authority, and the disruption of Mesopotamian trade routes left a power vacuum that enterprising merchant rulers quickly filled. Archaeological evidence from this transitional period shows dramatic changes in settlement patterns, with coastal cities expanding their territories, while inland sites often show signs of abandonment or decline. The political organisation that emerged in Phoenician cities represented a unique fusion of traditional Near Eastern monarchy with commercial pragmatism. Unlike the divine kingship models of Egypt or Mesopotamia, Phoenician rulers derived their authority primarily from their success in maritime trade and their ability to maintain profitable relationships with foreign powers. Inscriptions from Tyre dating to the 10th century BC describe King Hiram not as a divine figure but as builder of temples and establisher of trade routes, emphasizing his practical achievements rather than supernatural status. The monarchical system in Tyre developed sophisticated administrative structures to manage the city's expanding commercial empire. Palace archives discovered in recent excavations reveal a complex bureaucracy with specialized officials overseeing different aspects of trade and governance. The Rab Karum, or chief merchant, held responsibility for organizing trading expeditions and maintaining commercial relationships with foreign cities. Below this position, various officials managed specific commodities. Cedarwood, purple dye, metalwork and glass production each had dedicated administrators who reported directly to the king. Sidon's political structure showed similar characteristics but with important variations, reflecting the city's particular economic focus. Sidonian kings bore the title MLK, the same word used throughout Canaanite cultures, but their actual power derived from control over the city's metalworking industries and silver trade routes. A bilingual inscription from the 9th century BC describes King Eshmanazar as king of the Sidonians, son of King Tabnit, but the accompanying Phoenician text emphasises his role in expanding Sidon's commercial territories and establishing new trading posts along the Mediterranean coast. The monarchy at Byblos retained closer connections to traditional religious authority than its southern neighbours. Kings of Byblos continued to serve as high priests of the city's patron deity El, and their royal inscriptions frequently emphasise their role in temple construction and religious festivals. However, even at Byblos, commercial success remained the practical foundation of royal power. King Ahiram's famous sarcophagus, dating to around 1000 BC, bears inscriptions that threaten divine punishment for disturbing his tomb, but the sarcophagus itself demonstrates the wealth accumulated through trade, with its intricate carvings depicting scenes of royal banqueting and tribute presentation. Arwad's insular position created unique political challenges and opportunities. The city's location on an island roughly 3 kilometres from the mainland coast provided natural defence, but required constant maintenance of relationships with mainland territories to secure food supplies and raw materials. Arwadian kings developed a distinctive system of dual administration, with royal governors managing mainland territories, while the king himself remained on the island to oversee maritime operations. This arrangement allowed Arwad to maintain political independence, while exercising economic control over a much larger territory. The economic foundations supporting these political structures rested primarily on the Phoenicians' mastery of luxury production and long-distance trade. The purple dye industry, centred at Tyre, represented perhaps the most profitable and prestigious of these enterprises. The process of extracting dye from murex shells required enormous quantities of raw materials. Approximately 12,000 shells were needed to produce just 1.5 grams of dye, and sophisticated knowledge of chemical processing techniques. Archaeological excavations at Tyre's industrial quarter have revealed massive installations for crushing shells, extracting the dye-producing glands, and processing the resulting liquid through various stages of fermentation and concentration. The workshops producing Tyrian purple operated on an industrial scale that was unprecedented in the ancient world. Excavated facilities show evidence of standardized production techniques, with uniform crushing stones, standardized vats for processing different stages of dye production, and specialized tools for handling the toxic and foul-smelling materials involved. The workshops employed hundreds of workers, from shell collectors who dove for murex in the Mediterranean to skilled dyers who understood the complex chemical processes required to produce different shades of purple. The most prized variety, known as royal purple, required precise timing and temperature control that only master craftsmen possessed. Cedarwood trade represented another pillar of Phoenician prosperity, with Lebanese forests providing timber that was unmatched in quality throughout the ancient Near East. The Phoenicians developed sophisticated techniques for harvesting, processing and transporting cedar logs, which could reach lengths of 30 metres and weigh several tons. Specialised ships were constructed specifically for timber transport, with reinforced hulls and modified cargo holds designed to accommodate the massive logs. Harbour installations at Byblos included specialised facilities for loading timber, with stone ramps and wooden cranes that could handle the heaviest logs. The cedar trade required complex logistical coordination between mountain communities who felled the trees, coastal processors who prepared the timber for shipment, and maritime merchants who transported the finished products to foreign markets. Royal archives from Byblos describe detailed contracts specifying the dimensions, quality, and delivery schedules for cedar shipments to Egypt, Mesopotamia, and other major markets. The trade was so profitable that Phoenician kings maintained permanent representatives at foreign courts specifically to negotiate timber contracts and ensure steady demand. Glass production emerged as another major Phoenician industry during this period, with archaeological evidence suggesting that Phoenicians developed some of the earliest techniques for producing transparent glass. The industry centred at Sidon, where abundant supplies of high-quality sand provided ideal raw materials. Phoenician glassmakers discovered that adding certain minerals to the sand during the melting process could produce glass with different colours and properties. Their workshops produced everything from simple vessels for everyday use to elaborate decorative objects that commanded high prices in foreign markets. The technical knowledge required for glass production was closely guarded by craftsmen's guilds, with techniques passed down through family lines over generations. Archaeological analysis of glass fragments from Phoenician sites reveals consistent chemical compositions that indicate standardized production methods. The Phoenicians developed specialized furnaces capable of reaching temperatures exceeding 1000 degrees Celsius, along with tools for shaping molten glass into complex forms. Their innovations in glass production would later spread throughout the Mediterranean world, but during this early period, Phoenician cities maintained virtual monopolies on high-quality glass goods. Metalworking represented perhaps the most technically sophisticated of Phoenician industries. Workshops at Sidon produced bronze objects of exceptional quality, combining copper from Cyprus with tin imported from as far away as Spain and Britain. The alloy ratios used in Phoenician bronze work show remarkable consistency, indicating precise knowledge of metallurgical principles. Archaeological excavations have revealed specialized furnaces, crucibles and molds that demonstrate advanced casting techniques capable of producing complex objects with intricate decorative details. Silver working reached particular heights of sophistication in Phoenician cities. Craftsmen developed techniques for purifying raw silver ore, creating alloys with specific properties, and working the metal into elaborate decorative objects. The famous silver bowls found in Assyrian palaces, many bearing Phoenician inscriptions, demonstrate the high regard in which Phoenician metalwork was held throughout the ancient world. These bowls feature complex scenes combining Egyptian, Mesopotamian, and distinctly Phoenician artistic elements, showing how Phoenician craftsmen synthesized foreign influences into their own distinctive styles. Religious practices in Phoenician cities reflected the same cosmopolitan influences that characterized their commercial activities. The pantheon worshipped in Phoenician cities combined traditional Canaanite deities with foreign gods encountered through trade relationships. Baal, the storm god who controlled weather patterns crucial for maritime activities, held particular importance in coastal cities. Archaeological evidence from temples dedicated to Baal shows that worshippers offered model ships, anchors, and other maritime equipment, seeking divine protection for sea voyages. The goddess Astarte occupied a central position in Phoenician religious life, serving as patron of fertility, warfare, and maritime activities. Her temples, particularly the great sanctuary at Sidon, received offerings from throughout the Phoenician world. Inscriptions describe elaborate festivals in her honour, with processions, sacrificial ceremonies, and ritual prostitution that attracted pilgrims from distant cities. The temple complex at Sidon covered several hectares and included workshops, storage facilities, and residential quarters for priests and temple personnel. Melkort, the patron deity of Tyre, represented the divine aspect of kingship and commercial success. His cult combined traditional Canaanite elements with influences from Mesopotamian and Egyptian religious practices. The annual festival of Melkort's resurrection, celebrated in early spring, involved elaborate ceremonies that symbolically renewed the king's authority and blessed the coming year's trading expeditions. Archaeological excavations at Melkort's temple in Tyre have revealed evidence of animal sacrifices, including cattle, sheep, and exotic animals obtained through trade networks. The question of child sacrifice in Phoenician religious practices remains one of the most controversial aspects of their culture. Archaeological evidence from sites like the Tophet at Carthage provides clear proof that child sacrifice occurred in later Phoenician colonies, but evidence from the homeland cities is more ambiguous. Excavations at Phoenician temples have uncovered infant burials, but determining whether these represent sacrificial victims or natural deaths remains challenging. Classical sources, particularly Roman authors, describe Phoenician child sacrifice in vivid detail, but these accounts may reflect anti-Phoenician propaganda rather than accurate reporting. The social structure of Phoenician cities reflected their commercial orientation and cosmopolitan character. At the apex stood the merchant elite, families whose wealth derived from control of major trading enterprises and relationships with foreign markets. These families often intermarried with royal dynasties, creating networks of political and economic alliance that extended across multiple cities. Archaeological evidence of their wealth appears in elaborate tombs, luxury goods, and residential quarters with sophisticated architectural features. Below the merchant elite, a substantial middle class of skilled artisans, ship captains, and specialized traders formed the backbone of Phoenician society. These individuals possessed technical knowledge and commercial connections that made them valuable to the ruling elite while maintaining some degree of economic independence. Guild organizations provided structure for artisan communities, regulating training, quality standards, and pricing for different crafts. Archaeological evidence suggests these guilds maintained workshops, training facilities, and even residential quarters for their members. The integration of foreign populations represented a distinctive feature of Phoenician urban life. Unlike many ancient societies that maintained strict ethnic boundaries, Phoenician cities actively incorporated immigrants who possessed useful skills or commercial connections. Egyptian craftsmen, Mesopotamian scribes, and Anatolian metalworkers appear in Phoenician inscriptions as naturalized citizens rather than foreign residents. This openness to immigration provided Phoenician cities with access to diverse technical knowledge and expanded their commercial networks throughout the Mediterranean world. The prosperity and political independence achieved by Phoenician cities during the early Iron Age provided the foundation for their most significant historical achievement, the development of maritime technology and navigation techniques that would revolutionize Mediterranean commerce. By 900 BC, Phoenician shipwrights had refined their vessel designs far beyond the simple coastal craft of their Bronze Age predecessors, creating ships capable of sustained ocean voyages and carrying substantial cargo loads across vast distances. The evolution of Phoenician ship construction represented centuries of accumulated maritime experience translated into practical engineering solutions. Archaeological evidence from shipwrecks dating to this period reveals vessels constructed with cedar hulls averaging 20-30 meters in length, substantially larger than earlier designs. The ships featured distinctive curved prows carved with protective symbols, typically representations of horses' heads or divine eyes believed to guide vessels safely through dangerous waters. These decorative elements serve practical purposes as well, with the curved prow design reducing water resistance and improving the ship's ability to cut through Mediterranean swells. The hull construction employed a shell-first building technique where planks were joined edge to edge, using mortise and tenon joints, creating a watertight seal without relying entirely on caulking materials. Cedarwood's natural resistance to rot and insect damage made these joints remarkably durable, with some recovered examples showing minimal deterioration after centuries underwater. The planking was secured to internal frames using bronze nails and wooden dowels, creating a flexible structure that could withstand the stresses of ocean navigation while maintaining structural integrity. Phoenician ships incorporated several distinctive features that enhanced their seaworthiness and cargo capacity. The broad beam-to-length ratio, typically around 1:4, provided stability in rough seas while maximizing storage space for trade goods. A central well or hold, lined with lead sheets to prevent water damage, could accommodate diverse cargoes from bulk commodities like grain and metals to fragile luxury items requiring careful handling. Specialized storage areas included sealed compartments for liquids, reinforced sections for heavy items like stone anchors and metal ingots, and ventilated spaces for perishable goods. The development of sophisticated rigging systems allowed Phoenician vessels to harness wind power more effectively than their predecessors. Archaeological evidence suggests they employed a combination of square and triangular sails, with the main square sail providing primary propulsion and smaller triangular sails offering manoeuvrability in coastal waters. The rigging included multiple stay lines and adjustable yard arms that allowed crews to modify sail configuration based on wind conditions. Leather reinforcements at stress points and bronze fittings for critical connections demonstrated attention to the mechanical demands of sustained sailing. Navigation techniques developed by Phoenician mariners combined empirical observation with systematic knowledge accumulation that was passed down through generations of sea captains. The most fundamental skill involved celestial navigation using fixed stars, particularly Polaris, which Phoenician navigators called the Phoenician star. They developed methods for determining latitude by measuring the angle of Polaris above the horizon using simple but effective instruments. Bronze devices recovered from shipwrecks include graduated measuring tools that appear designed for astronomical observations, though their exact operation remains partially reconstructed. Seasonal sailing patterns represented crucial knowledge that determined the success or failure of trading expeditions. Phoenician navigators understood that Mediterranean weather patterns followed predictable cycles, with optimal sailing conditions occurring during specific months. Spring departures, typically in March or April, allowed traders to reach Western Mediterranean destinations during the favourable summer sailing season and return eastward before autumn storms made navigation dangerous. Winter voyages were generally avoided except for emergency situations, as Mediterranean storms during this period could easily overwhelm even well-constructed vessels. Coastal navigation relied on detailed knowledge of landmarks, water depths, and harbour approaches that was accumulated through centuries of maritime experience. Phoenician pilots developed mental maps of Mediterranean coastlines that included information about safe anchorages, fresh water sources, and potential hazards like submerged rocks or treacherous currents. This knowledge was closely guarded professional information, passed from master navigators to apprentices through years of practical training. Some evidence suggests that written sailing directions existed, though no complete examples have survived to modern times. The establishment of trading networks spanning from the Strait of Gibraltar to the Black Sea represented the practical application of these advanced maritime capabilities. Phoenician merchants created commercial relationships that connected diverse regional economies, facilitating the exchange of raw materials, manufactured goods, and luxury items across unprecedented distances. The scale and complexity of these networks required sophisticated organizational systems, standardized commercial practices, and diplomatic relationships with numerous foreign powers. Trade routes to the Western Mediterranean developed gradually as Phoenician explorers pushed beyond the traditional boundaries of Bronze Age commerce. The journey to southern Spain, rich in silver deposits, required navigation skills and vessel capabilities that had not existed in earlier periods. Archaeological evidence from Spanish sites shows Phoenician presence by the 9th century BC, with settlements at locations chosen specifically for their access to mineral resources and their suitability as bases for further exploration. The silver obtained from Spanish mines became a cornerstone of Phoenician prosperity, providing the precious metal that facilitated commercial transactions throughout their trading network. The northern routes to the Black Sea opened access to grain supplies from the fertile regions around the Sea of Azov and the lower Danube River. These routes required passage through the Dardanelles and Bosporus, narrow waterways controlled by local populations who demanded tribute or trading privileges in exchange for safe passage. Phoenician merchants established permanent representatives at key points along these routes, creating commercial relationships that ensured regular access to grain supplies that could supplement the limited agricultural production of their home cities. Commercial practices developed by Phoenician traders standardized many aspects of Mediterranean commerce that would influence economic relationships for centuries. The use of standardized weights and measures facilitated transactions between merchants from different cities and cultures. Archaeological finds show remarkable consistency in weight standards across Phoenician trading posts, with bronze weights bearing inscriptions that identify their origin and verify their accuracy. These standards were maintained through regular calibration against master weights kept at major commercial centres. Credit arrangements and commercial partnerships allowed Phoenician merchants to finance large-scale trading expeditions without requiring immediate payment for all goods exchanged. Cuneiform tablets from Mesopotamian archives describe complex commercial agreements where Phoenician merchants received goods on credit, transported them to distant markets, and returned with payment in precious metals or other valuable commodities. These arrangements required legal frameworks that could enforce contracts across vast distances and different legal systems, leading to the development of commercial law that transcended local jurisdictions. The establishment of trading posts and permanent settlements represented a fundamental shift from simple commercial exchange to territorial expansion and colonial administration. Unlike earlier trading relationships that involved temporary visits to foreign markets, Phoenician expansion created permanent communities that served as bases for ongoing commercial operations and launching points for further exploration. The selection of sites for these settlements reflected careful consideration of strategic and economic factors. Carthage, founded according to traditional dating in 814 BC, exemplified the Phoenician approach to colonial settlement. The site chosen for the new city offered an excellent natural harbour protected by offshore islands, access to fertile agricultural land in the Tunisian interior, and a strategic position controlling maritime traffic between the eastern and western Mediterranean basins. Archaeological excavations at early Carthage reveal planned urban development with specialised quarters for different activities, residential areas for colonists, industrial zones for craft production, commercial districts near the harbour, and religious precincts dedicated to Phoenician deities. The founding of Carthage involved substantial investment in infrastructure and urban planning that demonstrated sophisticated organisational capabilities. Harbour installations included artificial breakwaters constructed from massive stone blocks, quays designed to accommodate large merchant vessels, and specialised facilities for ship maintenance and repair. The city's water supply system channeled fresh water from inland sources through underground aqueducts, while drainage systems managed sewage and storm runoff. These engineering projects required coordinated labour forces and technical expertise that was transferred from the mother cities in the Levant. Cadiz, established at the western terminus of Mediterranean navigation near the Strait of Gibraltar, served as the primary base for Phoenician operations in the Atlantic region. The settlement's location on a defensible island provided security while offering access to the silver-rich regions of southern Spain. Archaeological evidence shows that Cadiz quickly developed into a major commercial centre, with facilities for processing and refining silver ore, workshops for producing trade goods, and extensive storage areas for commodities awaiting shipment to eastern Mediterranean markets. The network of smaller trading posts established throughout the Mediterranean followed patterns that reflected both commercial opportunities and strategic considerations. Sites were typically chosen for their harbour facilities, access to local resources, or position along major shipping routes. Many of these settlements began as seasonal camps where merchants could shelter during winter months or repair vessels damaged during long voyages. Over time, successful locations attracted permanent populations and developed into self-sustaining communities. Technological innovations developed within the Phoenician trading network facilitated cultural exchanges that transformed societies throughout the Mediterranean region. The spread of ironworking technology represented one of the most significant of these transfers, as Phoenician merchants carried knowledge of iron production techniques from regions where the technology was well established to areas where it remained unknown or primitive. Archaeological evidence shows that iron tools and weapons appeared at sites throughout the Western Mediterranean during the same period that Phoenician trading activities intensified. The transmission of ironworking knowledge required more than simple trade in finished products. Effective iron production demanded understanding of ore selection, furnace construction, temperature control, and forging techniques that could only be acquired through direct instruction and practical experience. Phoenician settlements included metalworking specialists who established workshops in colonial locations, training local populations in iron production methods while adapting techniques to local ore sources and fuel supplies. This technology transfer created economic opportunities for local communities while expanding the supply of iron tools and weapons available to Phoenician traders. Agricultural techniques spread through Phoenician networks contributed to increased food production in many Mediterranean regions. The introduction of new crop varieties, irrigation methods, and cultivation practices improved agricultural yields and diversified food supplies. Phoenician traders carried seeds and cuttings of valuable plants between different climate zones, establishing olive groves in regions previously unfamiliar with olive cultivation and introducing grain varieties adapted to different growing conditions. Archaeological evidence from Phoenician settlements shows experimentation with crop rotation systems and soil management techniques that increased agricultural productivity. The development of standardized pottery production techniques facilitated trade while spreading artistic and technical innovations throughout the Mediterranean world. Phoenician potters developed distinctive styles that combined functional design with their decorative elements drawn from multiple cultural traditions. Their workshops produced vessels specifically designed for maritime transport, with shapes and sizes optimized for efficient packing in ship holds. The wide distribution of Phoenician pottery types throughout Mediterranean archaeological sites demonstrates the extent of their commercial networks and the influence of their artistic traditions. Artistic exchanges facilitated by Phoenician commercial activities created new synthetic styles that combined elements from Egyptian, Mesopotamian, and local Mediterranean traditions. Phoenician craftsmen working in colonial settlements adapted their traditional techniques to local materials and customer preferences while introducing foreign artistic concepts to regional populations. Ivory carvings found at sites throughout the Mediterranean show distinctive Phoenician stylistic elements combined with local decorative motifs, creating hybrid artistic traditions that reflected the cosmopolitan character of Phoenician commercial culture. The establishment of permanent Phoenician communities in distant locations required the development of administrative systems capable of governing diverse populations across vast distances. Colonial administrators needed to balance the commercial interests of their home cities with the practical requirements of managing local populations and resources. Archaeological evidence suggests that Phoenician colonies maintained considerable autonomy in day-to-day governance while remaining connected to their founding cities through commercial relationships and religious ties. The governance of Phoenician colonies required careful attention to maintaining cultural and religious connections with their founding cities while adapting to local conditions and populations. This administrative challenge became even more complex when considering the development and spread of what would become their most enduring contribution to world civilization, the alphabetic writing system. The evolution of Phoenician script from earlier Proto-Canaanite writing systems represented a revolutionary simplification that would fundamentally transform human communication and record-keeping capabilities. The Proto-Canaanite script from which the Phoenician alphabet developed had emerged around 1700 BC as a simplified adaptation of Egyptian hieroglyphics. Archaeological evidence from sites like Sarabit el-Qadim in the Sinai Peninsula shows early attempts by Canaanite workers to create a writing system that could represent their language using a reduced set of symbols. These early inscriptions, found carved into rock faces and mining equipment, demonstrate the practical origins of alphabetic writing among people who needed efficient methods for recording information but lacked access to the extensive scribal training required for complex writing systems. The transformation from Proto-Canaanite script to the mature Phoenician alphabet occurred gradually over several centuries, with archaeological evidence showing progressive standardization and simplification of letter forms. Inscriptions from Byblos dating to around 1200 BC reveal a writing system that retained some pictographic elements while moving towards purely phonetic representation. The famous Ahiram sarcophagus inscription, carved around 1000 BC, displays letter forms that are recognizably ancestral to later Phoenician script, while maintaining decorative elements that suggest the system's pictographic origins. The mature Phoenician alphabet that emerged by 900 BC consisted of 22 consonantal letters, each representing a single sound rather than a syllable or concept. This radical simplification eliminated the hundreds of symbols required by cuneiform or hieroglyphic systems, reducing the basic writing toolkit to a manageable set that could be learned by individuals without extensive scribal training. Archaeological analysis of Phoenician inscriptions shows remarkable consistency in letter forms across different cities and time periods, indicating systematic standardization that facilitated communication across their commercial network. The mechanics of Phoenician alphabetic writing reflected practical considerations that made it ideally suited for commercial applications. Unlike cuneiform, which required specialized clay tablets and styluses, or Egyptian hieroglyphics, which demanded expensive papyrus and complex pigments, Phoenician script could be written on various materials using simple tools. Inscriptions appear on stone monuments, metal objects, pottery, sherds, and perishable materials like leather and papyrus. The linear nature of the letters made them suitable for carving into hard materials, while their simplified forms allowed rapid writing on soft surfaces. The absence of vowel markings in Phoenician script initially appears to modern observers as a limitation, but this characteristic actually enhanced the system's flexibility for representing related languages. Semitic languages share consonantal roots that carry basic meaning, with vowel patterns indicating grammatical relationships. A Phoenician merchant could write the consonants of a word, and readers speaking related languages could supply appropriate vowels based on context. This feature made Phoenician script useful for international commerce, where traders needed to communicate with speakers of various Semitic dialects. Archaeological evidence demonstrates that Phoenician merchants used their writing system extensively for commercial record-keeping. Ostraka found at trading sites throughout the Mediterranean contain lists of goods, quantities, and prices written in Phoenician script. These commercial documents reveal sophisticated accounting practices that tracked inventory, recorded transactions, and calculated profits across multiple trading ventures. The standardized nature of the script allowed merchants from different cities to understand each other's records, facilitating partnerships and joint ventures across vast distances. Contract tablets discovered at Phoenician settlements show how alphabetic writing enabled complex legal arrangements that would have been impractical with earlier writing systems. Marriage contracts, property transfers, and commercial agreements could be written quickly and understood by parties who possessed basic literacy skills. The legal precision possible with alphabetic writing allowed Phoenician merchants to create enforceable agreements with foreign partners, reducing the risks associated with long-distance trade. Archaeological evidence from Carthage includes contract archives that document commercial relationships spanning decades and involving multiple generations of merchant families. The advantages of alphabetic writing for long-distance communication transformed Phoenician diplomatic and administrative capabilities. Royal correspondence could be written rapidly and transmitted efficiently across the Mediterranean network. Archaeological discoveries include letters between Phoenician cities discussing military alliances, trade agreements, and religious matters. The speed and economy of alphabetic writing made regular correspondence practical, allowing colonial administrators to maintain contact with their home cities and coordinate activities across their expanding territories. The transmission of the Phoenician alphabet to other cultures began through the same commercial networks that spread Phoenician goods and technologies. Greek merchants trading with Phoenician cities encountered alphabetic writing and recognized its practical advantages over their existing Linear B syllabic system. Archaeological evidence from 8th century Greek sites shows early Greek alphabetic inscriptions that closely follow Phoenician letter forms while adapting the system to represent Greek phonetic requirements. The Greek adaptation of Phoenician script involved crucial innovations that enhanced the system's versatility. Greek scribes converted several Phoenician consonantal letters that represented sounds absent from Greek into vowel markings, creating the first true alphabet that systematically represented both consonants and vowels. This modification made the writing system accessible to speakers of Indo-European languages whose grammatical structures differed significantly from Semitic patterns. Archaeological evidence shows that this Greek innovation occurred rapidly, with fully voweled Greek inscriptions appearing within generations of the first Greek contact with Phoenician script. The spread of Greek alphabetic writing throughout the Mediterranean world carried Phoenician innovations to populations that had never encountered the original script. Greek colonies established throughout southern Italy and Sicily introduced alphabetic writing to local populations, who adapted it for their own languages. The Etruscan alphabet, derived from Greek models, shows clear traces of its Phoenician ancestry, while incorporating modifications suited to Etruscan phonetic requirements. Archaeological inscriptions demonstrate how each successive adaptation refined the system's ability to represent different linguistic structures. Roman adoption of alphabetic writing through Etruscan intermediaries created the foundation for the most widely distributed writing system in human history. Early Latin inscriptions show letter forms that can be traced through Etruscan and Greek adaptations back to Phoenician originals. Roman administrative needs drove further standardization and systematization of alphabetic writing, with official inscriptions establishing letter forms and spelling conventions that would influence European writing for millennia. The practical advantages that had made Phoenician script ideal for commercial applications proved equally valuable for Roman legal, military and administrative documentation. The impact of alphabetic writing on literacy rates throughout the ancient Mediterranean represents one of the most significant social transformations of the Iron Age. Complex writing systems like cuneiform and hieroglyphics had required years of specialized training that limited literacy to professional scribal classes and educated elites. Alphabetic writing could be learned by ordinary merchants, craftsmen and farmers who needed basic reading and writing skills for practical purposes. Archaeological evidence from various Mediterranean sites shows increasing numbers of informal inscriptions on everyday objects, indicating expanded literacy among non-elite populations. Administrative applications of alphabetic writing transformed governance capabilities throughout the Mediterranean world. Tax records, legal codes, and military rosters could be maintained more efficiently using alphabetic script than earlier systems. Archaeological discoveries include administrative archives from various cultures that show systematic record-keeping practices derived ultimately from Phoenician commercial innovations. The ability to maintain detailed written records enabled more sophisticated forms of government administration and legal systems that could manage increasingly complex societies. The preservation and transmission of cultural knowledge benefited enormously from the efficiency of alphabetic writing systems. Religious texts, historical records, and technical knowledge could be recorded more easily and copied more accurately using alphabetic script. Archaeological evidence includes religious inscriptions, legal codes, and technical manuals written in various alphabetic scripts throughout the Mediterranean region. The reduced cost and complexity of alphabetic writing made books and written documents accessible to broader populations, facilitating the spread of ideas and knowledge across cultural boundaries. Scientific and technical knowledge transmission accelerated through alphabetic writing systems that made detailed instructions and observations easier to record and share. Archaeological evidence includes technical manuals, astronomical observations, and medical texts written in alphabetic scripts that show how practical knowledge spread throughout the Mediterranean world. The precision possible with alphabetic writing allowed technical specialists to document complex procedures and share innovations across vast distances, contributing to technological advancement throughout the region. The standardization of commercial practices across the Mediterranean world reflected the unifying influence of alphabetic writing systems derived from Phoenician innovations. Merchants using related alphabetic scripts could communicate effectively despite speaking different languages, facilitating trade relationships that transcended cultural boundaries. Archaeological evidence shows increasing standardization in weights, measures, and commercial terminology throughout regions where alphabetic writing had spread, indicating the system's role in creating shared commercial practices. Educational practices transformed throughout the Mediterranean world as alphabetic writing made literacy accessible to broader populations. Archaeological evidence includes writing exercises, school texts, and educational materials that show how alphabetic writing was taught to students from various social backgrounds. The democratization of literacy enabled by alphabetic systems created more educated populations capable of participating in complex economic, political and cultural activities that had previously been limited to scribal elites. The influence of Phoenician alphabetic innovations extended far beyond the Mediterranean basin through subsequent cultural transmissions and adaptations. The Aramaic script derived from Phoenician models became the standard writing system throughout the Persian Empire, carrying alphabetic principles across the ancient Near East. Archaeological evidence shows Aramaic inscriptions from India to Egypt, demonstrating how Phoenician innovations influenced writing systems across vast regions of the ancient world. The development of Arabic script from Aramaic intermediaries carried Phoenician alphabetic principles into medieval and modern Islamic civilization. The efficiency and flexibility that had made Phoenician script valuable for ancient Mediterranean commerce proved equally advantageous for Islamic administrative, legal, and religious applications. Modern Arabic writing retains the consonantal structure and right-to-left direction of its Phoenician ancestors, while incorporating modifications suited to Arabic linguistic requirements. The revolutionary impact of Phoenician alphabetic writing created the intellectual infrastructure that would enable their most ambitious colonial venture, the establishment of Carthage as an independent power capable of rivaling the greatest empires of the ancient world. According to Timaeus of Tauromenium, whose chronology became the standard ancient dating system, Carthage was founded in 814 BC by Elissa, better known to history as Dido, a Tyrian princess whose flight from political persecution in her homeland led to the creation of what would become the Western Mediterranean's dominant maritime empire. The historical Elissa emerges from fragmentary sources as a member of Tyre's royal family during a period of intense political instability in the late 9th century BC. Contemporary Assyrian records describe increasing pressure on Phoenician cities as Shalmaneser III and his successors demanded ever higher tribute payments while restricting the commercial activities that generated the wealth needed to meet these demands. Archaeological evidence from Tyre during this period shows signs of economic stress, with reduced construction activity and simplified pottery production suggesting declining prosperity. Within this context of external pressure and internal competition for limited resources, conflicts within Tyre's ruling elite became increasingly violent. Elissa's departure from Tyre involved substantial planning and resources that indicate she commanded significant political support despite her eventual exile. Later sources describe her as the widow of Akerbas, a high priest whose wealth derived from temple treasures and commercial investments. When Alyssa's brother Pygmalion murdered Acerbus to seize control of these assets, she organised a faction of nobles and merchants who shared her opposition to his rule. Archaeological evidence suggests this political crisis occurred during a period when Assyrian pressure on Phoenician cities was intensifying, making internal stability crucial for survival. The expedition that established Carthage represented a carefully planned colonial venture rather than desperate flight from persecution. Alyssa's supporters included experienced merchants, skilled craftsmen, and maritime specialists whose expertise would prove essential for establishing a successful settlement. The fleet that departed Tyre carried not only the human resources needed for colonization, but also the tools, equipment, and precious metals necessary for establishing commercial operations in a new location. Archaeological excavations at early Carthage reveal evidence of planned urban development that required substantial initial investment and technical knowledge. The site selected for Carthage demonstrated sophisticated understanding of strategic and commercial considerations that would determine the settlement's long-term success. The location on the North African coast offered several crucial advantages: a naturally protected harbour suitable for large vessels, fertile agricultural land capable of supporting a substantial population, and a strategic position controlling maritime traffic between the eastern and western Mediterranean basins. The harbour complex included two separate anchorages, with a circular military harbour designed for warships and a rectangular commercial harbour equipped with facilities for merchant vessels. The defensive advantages of Carthage's location became apparent through its topographical features and subsequent urban development. The city occupied a peninsula extending into the Mediterranean, with water providing natural protection on three sides. The landward approach crossed a narrow isthmus that could be easily fortified and defended against hostile forces. Archaeological evidence shows that early Carthaginian settlers immediately began constructing defensive works, including walls, ditches, and fortified gates that controlled access to the city. These fortifications were repeatedly expanded and strengthened over subsequent centuries as Carthage's wealth and strategic importance grew. Early Carthaginian society reflected the cosmopolitan character typical of Phoenician commercial centres, while adapting to the specific challenges of colonial settlement in North Africa. The initial population consisted primarily of Tyrian exiles and their supporters, but archaeological evidence indicates rapid incorporation of local Berber populations who possessed essential knowledge about regional conditions, agricultural techniques, and trade routes extending into the African interior. This integration created a distinctive Carthaginian identity that combined Phoenician traditions with North African influences. The development of Carthage's political system represented an evolution from traditional Phoenician monarchy toward a more complex republican structure that balanced competing interests within the colonial community. Unlike the hereditary kingship that characterized the homeland cities, Carthaginian governance incorporated institutional checks on executive power that reflected the diverse backgrounds and interests of the colonial population. The suffetes, or chief magistrates, served as the primary executive officers, typically elected for one-year terms and responsible for military command, diplomatic relations, and commercial policy. The suffetes operated within a governmental framework that included several other important institutions designed to prevent concentration of power in individual hands. The Council of Elders, composed of former magistrates and leading citizens, served as an advisory body with significant influence over policy decisions. Archaeological evidence from Carthage's civic centre includes meeting halls and administrative buildings that suggest formal procedures for governmental deliberation and decision-making. Inscriptions describe various officials with specialised responsibilities: military commanders, harbour masters, tax collectors, and judges who administered legal proceedings according to established procedures. The popular assembly provided a mechanism for broader citizen participation in Carthaginian governance. though the extent of this participation varied considerably over time and circumstances. During periods of military crisis or major policy debates, the assembly could override decisions made by the Sufetes and Council of Elders. Archaeological evidence suggests that assembly meetings were held in large public spaces capable of accommodating thousands of participants, indicating that citizen involvement in governance was more than merely symbolic. However, practical political power remained concentrated among the wealthy merchant families whose commercial activities generated the resources needed for military defence and urban development. Carthaginian expansion across North Africa began almost immediately after the city's establishment, driven by both defensive considerations and commercial opportunities. The fertile agricultural regions surrounding Carthage provided food supplies for the growing urban population, but controlling these territories required military campaigns against Berber tribes who had previously dominated the region. Archaeological evidence from sites throughout Tunisia shows Carthaginian settlements extending inland along river valleys and coastal plains, with fortified posts controlling strategic locations and trade routes. The integration of Berber populations into the Carthaginian system involved a complex mixture of military conquest, diplomatic alliance, and commercial partnership that varied according to local conditions and tribal structures. Some Berber groups were incorporated as military allies, providing cavalry and light infantry forces that became essential components of Carthaginian armies. Others maintained semi-autonomous status as tributary peoples who paid taxes and provided military service in exchange for protection and access to Mediterranean trade networks. Archaeological evidence includes Berber settlements with Carthaginian pottery, coins and architectural elements, indicating cultural exchange and economic integration. Carthaginian agricultural development in North Africa employed intensive cultivation techniques that dramatically increased food production compared to traditional Berber farming methods. Archaeological surveys reveal evidence of sophisticated irrigation systems, terraced hillsides, and planned agricultural settlements that maximize productivity from available land and water resources. The introduction of new crop varieties from the Eastern Mediterranean, combined with improved farming techniques, created agricultural surpluses that could support urban populations and generate export commodities for international trade. The expansion into Iberia represented Carthage's most ambitious and profitable territorial acquisition, driven by access to the silver mines that provided the precious metal essential for international commerce. Archaeological evidence indicates that Carthaginian presence in southern Spain began in the 8th century BC, initially through trading relationships with local populations who controlled mineral resources. Over time, these commercial connections evolved into territorial control as Carthaginian military forces secured mining regions and established permanent settlements to oversee extraction and processing operations. The Iberian silver mines operated on an industrial scale that dwarfed previous mining activities in the region. Archaeological excavations reveal extensive underground workings, sophisticated drainage systems, and processing facilities capable of handling enormous quantities of ore. The mining operations employed thousands of workers, including slaves captured in military campaigns, local labourers working under Carthaginian supervision, and skilled specialists responsible for technical aspects of extraction and refinement. The silver produced in these mines provided Carthage with the financial resources needed to maintain military forces, construct public works, and finance further territorial expansion. Carthaginian control over Western Mediterranean trade routes developed through a combination of commercial innovation, diplomatic negotiation, and military enforcement that created a maritime empire spanning from Gibraltar to Sicily. The strategic location of Carthage enabled its merchants to control traffic passing between the eastern and western Mediterranean basins, while colonial settlements at key points along major shipping routes provided bases for commercial operations and naval patrols. Archaeological evidence from trading posts throughout the Western Mediterranean shows standardized Carthaginian pottery, weights, and coins that indicate systematic commercial organization. The development of Carthaginian naval power reflected both the commercial requirements of protecting merchant shipping and the military necessities of territorial defence and expansion. Archaeological remains of Carthaginian warships reveal vessels specifically designed for combat rather than cargo transport, with reinforced hulls, bronze ram attachments for ramming enemy ships, and specialised equipment for marine warfare. The circular military harbour at Carthage could accommodate over 200 warships, indicating naval forces of unprecedented size for the Western Mediterranean region. Carthaginian economic dominance extended beyond simple control of trade routes to include systematic development of agricultural estates throughout their North African territories. These estates employed slave labour on a massive scale, with archaeological evidence indicating plantation-style agriculture focused on producing export crops like grain, olive oil, and wine for Mediterranean markets. The agricultural surplus generated by these estates provided food security for Carthaginian urban populations, while creating additional export commodities that enhanced the city's commercial wealth. The social structure that developed in Carthage reflected the diverse origins of its population and the commercial focus of its economy. At the apex stood the merchant aristocracy, families whose wealth derived from control of major trading enterprises, mining operations, and agricultural estates. These families dominated political offices, military commands, and religious positions, while maintaining extensive international connections through commercial partnerships and diplomatic relationships. Archaeological evidence of their wealth appears in elaborate residential quarters, luxury goods, and monumental tombs that rivaled those of contemporary kings and emperors. Below the merchant elite, a substantial middle class of skilled artisans, ship captains, and commercial agents formed the backbone of Carthaginian society. These individuals possessed specialized knowledge and professional skills that made them valuable to the ruling elite, while providing opportunities for social advancement through successful commercial ventures. Guild organizations regulated various crafts and trades, maintaining quality standards and training systems that preserved technical knowledge across generations. Archaeological evidence suggests these guilds possess significant economic influence and political representation within Carthaginian governmental institutions. The lowest levels of Carthaginian society included free labourers, foreign residents, and the enormous slave population that provided much of the manual labour for mining, agriculture, and urban construction projects. Slaves were acquired through military campaigns, commercial transactions, and tribute payments from subject peoples throughout the Carthaginian Empire. Archaeological evidence indicates that slave conditions varied considerably depending on their skills and occupations, with some achieving positions of responsibility and even eventual freedom, while others endured harsh conditions in mines and agricultural estates. The religious significance of Tanit's cult extended far beyond spiritual matters to encompass the political and military foundations of Carthaginian power. Her temple complex served as the repository for state treasures, the venue for important diplomatic ceremonies, and the symbolic centre of Carthaginian identity throughout their expanding territories. However, by 800 BC, this carefully constructed world of Phoenician commercial dominance and colonial expansion faced unprecedented challenges from rising imperial powers whose military capabilities and territorial ambitions would fundamentally alter the balance of power throughout the ancient Near East. The Assyrian Empire under Tiglath-Pileser III represented a new type of military organisation that combined professional standing armies with systematic siege warfare techniques specifically designed to overcome the defensive advantages that had previously protected Phoenician cities. Unlike earlier Mesopotamian powers that relied primarily on seasonal campaigns and tribute collection, the Neo-Assyrian state developed administrative systems capable of maintaining permanent military pressure on distant territories while systematically incorporating conquered regions into their imperial structure. Archaeological evidence from Assyrian administrative centres reveals detailed records of tribute payments, military deployments, and logistical planning that demonstrate unprecedented organisational sophistication. The Assyrian military machine that threatened Phoenician independence employed technological innovations that rendered traditional defensive strategies obsolete. Iron weapons had replaced bronze throughout Assyrian forces, providing superior cutting edges and greater durability in extended combat. Cavalry units equipped with composite bows could harass enemy forces and disrupt supply lines with mobility that infantry formations could not match. Most significantly, Assyrian siege engineers had developed specialized equipment and techniques for breaching fortified walls that had previously made coastal cities virtually impregnable. The siege towers employed by Assyrian forces stood as high as city walls, constructed from timber frameworks protected by bronze plates and animal hides soaked in water to prevent fire damage. These mobile fortifications could be wheeled against defensive walls while providing protected platforms for archers and assault troops. Archaeological remains from Assyrian siege sites show evidence of massive earthwork ramps constructed to bring siege towers and battering rams to bear against the strongest sections of enemy fortifications. The engineering expertise required for these operations represented accumulated military experience from campaigns throughout the Assyrian Empire. Battering rams developed by Assyrian siege specialists incorporated bronze-capped heads suspended from wooden frameworks that could deliver concentrated force against specific points in defensive walls. The largest of these devices required teams of dozens of soldiers to operate effectively, but their impact could breach masonry that had withstood previous attacks. Protective coverings made from bronze plates and leather shields defended the ram operators from defensive fire, while they systematically weakened targeted wall sections. Archaeological excavations at sites besieged by Assyrian forces reveal distinctive patterns of wall damage that indicate the use of these specialized siege weapons. The systematic nature of Assyrian campaigns against Phoenician cities reflected careful intelligence gathering and strategic planning that maximized military effectiveness while minimizing the costs of prolonged sieges. Assyrian commanders understood that Phoenician wealth derived from maritime commerce, making it essential to coordinate land-based sieges with naval blockades that could cut off supply lines and prevent evacuation by sea. Archaeological evidence suggests that Assyrian forces established fortified camps at strategic locations around besieged cities, creating permanent military installations that could maintain pressure for extended periods. The siege of Tyre under Shalmaneser V beginning in 724 BC demonstrated both the strengths and limitations of Assyrian siege warfare when applied to island cities with sophisticated defensive preparations. Tyre's position on an offshore island connected to the mainland by a narrow causeway provided natural advantages that Assyrian siege equipment could not easily overcome. The city's harbours remained accessible to supply ships, despite Assyrian control of the surrounding coastline, while the island's fortifications had been strengthened over centuries of military threats. Archaeological underwater surveys around Tyre have revealed evidence of defensive installations including submerged barriers and harbour chains designed to prevent enemy vessels from approaching the city's ports. The Tyrian defence strategy combined active resistance with diplomatic manoeuvring, designed to exploit divisions within the Assyrian Empire and secure external support from other powers threatened by Assyrian expansion. King Luli of Tyre maintained diplomatic relationships with Egypt, Cyprus and other regional powers, while organising military cooperation among Phoenician cities facing similar threats. Archaeological evidence from this period includes weapons caches, fortification repairs, and storage facilities that indicate systematic preparation for extended siege warfare. The city's famous purple dye workshops continued operating during the siege, with archaeological deposits showing sustained production activities that generated revenue for purchasing military supplies and mercenary forces. The duration of the Tyrian siege, which extended for 5 years according to Assyrian records, demonstrated the effectiveness of island defences against even the most sophisticated siege warfare techniques available in the 8th century BC. Assyrian forces controlled the mainland territories around Tyre and intercepted land-based supply routes, but the city's maritime connections remained partially functional throughout the siege period. Archaeological evidence from contemporary Phoenician sites shows continued trade activities and diplomatic correspondence that indicate Tyre's resistance inspired other cities while complicating Assyrian military planning throughout the region. The eventual resolution of the siege involved negotiated settlement rather than military conquest, with Tyre agreeing to pay substantial tribute while maintaining nominal independence and commercial privileges. Assyrian records describe tribute payments including gold, silver, precious stones, ivory, and luxury textiles that represented enormous wealth, but allowed Tyre to preserve its essential commercial infrastructure. Archaeological evidence suggests that tribute payments were structured to avoid crippling the economic activities that generated the wealth Assyria sought to exploit, creating a sustainable relationship that benefited both parties despite its coercive foundation. Sidon faced different challenges during the Assyrian campaigns due to its mainland location and different defensive capabilities. The city's position on the coast provided some protection from land-based attacks, but Assyrian forces could establish complete encirclement more easily than at island Tyre. Archaeological excavations at Sidon reveal evidence of siege damage during this period, including destroyed buildings, burned storage areas, and hasty repairs to defensive walls that indicate intense military pressure. The city's famous metalworking industries suffered significant disruption, with archaeological deposits showing reduced production and simplified techniques that reflect wartime conditions. The Sidonian response to Assyrian pressure involved both military resistance and diplomatic accommodation, designed to preserve the city's essential commercial functions while meeting imperial demands for tribute and submission. King Ethbal of Sidon negotiated agreements that allowed continued operation of the city's silver trade networks, while providing Assyrian forces with access to Phoenician naval expertise and maritime resources. Archaeological evidence includes Assyrian administrative seals and cuneiform tablets found in Sidonian contexts, indicating direct imperial oversight of commercial activities and tribute collection. Arwad's unique position as an island city-state provided defensive advantages similar to Tyre, while creating different strategic challenges for both attackers and defenders. The city's control over mainland territories required constant communication and supply coordination that Assyrian forces could disrupt through land-based operations. Archaeological evidence from Arwadian territories shows evidence of military campaigns during this period, including destroyed settlements, abandoned agricultural installations, and fortified refuges where populations sought protection during Assyrian raids. The Arwadian strategy for dealing with Assyrian pressure emphasized naval mobility and diplomatic flexibility that allowed the city to maintain essential commercial operations while avoiding direct military confrontation when possible. The island's position enabled rapid communication with other Phoenician cities and foreign allies, facilitating coordinated resistance efforts and mutual support arrangements. Archaeological deposits from this period include weapons, armour, and military equipment from various Mediterranean sources, indicating active procurement of military supplies through commercial networks that remained partially functional despite Assyrian interference. Byblos, with its long history of accommodation with foreign powers and its particular relationship with Egypt, pursued different strategies for managing Assyrian pressure. The city's traditional role as intermediary between Egyptian and Mesopotamian interests provided diplomatic options unavailable to other Phoenician cities. Archaeological evidence shows continued Egyptian influence at Byblos during the Assyrian period, including Egyptian pottery, religious objects, and architectural elements that indicate sustained cultural connections despite changing political circumstances. The tribute arrangements negotiated between Phoenician cities and Assyrian administrators created complex relationships that combined elements of subjugation with commercial partnership. Assyrian records describe tribute payments that included not only precious metals and luxury goods, but also technical services, naval support, and commercial intelligence that enhanced Assyrian capabilities throughout their empire. Archaeological evidence suggests that these arrangements allowed Phoenician cities to maintain much of their internal autonomy while contributing to Assyrian military and economic objectives. The Babylonian period following Assyrian decline brought new challenges and opportunities for Phoenician cities, as Nebuchadnezzar II consolidated control over the former Assyrian territories. The Neo-Babylonian Empire employed different administrative methods than their Assyrian predecessors, with greater emphasis on commercial relationships and less systematic use of military force for tribute collection. Archaeological evidence from Babylonian administrative sites shows more sophisticated record-keeping systems and more complex commercial arrangements with subject peoples throughout the empire. Nebuchadnezzar's siege of Tyre, beginning around 585 BC, represented the most sustained military effort ever directed against the island city, lasting 13 years according to contemporary sources. The siege employed many of the same techniques developed by Assyrian forces, but with greater persistence and more systematic application of economic pressure designed to exhaust Tyrian resources over time. Archaeological evidence from this period shows signs of severe economic stress within the city, including simplified pottery production, reduced construction activity, and evidence of food shortages that indicate the effectiveness of Babylonian siege tactics. The construction of siege works around Tyre during the Babylonian period involved massive engineering projects that transformed the landscape around the city. Babylonian forces built extensive earthwork fortifications, siege towers, and harbour installations designed to prevent maritime resupply of the besieged city. Archaeological surveys of the area reveal remnants of these installations, including stone foundations, drainage systems, and defensive positions that indicate systematic military engineering on an unprecedented scale. The persistence required for these construction projects demonstrates Babylonian determination to achieve complete victory rather than negotiated settlement. The outcome of the Babylonian siege remains historically ambiguous, with different sources providing conflicting accounts of whether Tyre eventually surrendered, negotiated a settlement, or successfully resisted until Babylonian forces withdrew. Archaeological evidence from the period immediately following the siege shows signs of both destruction and continuity that could support various interpretations. Some areas of the city show clear evidence of damage and abandonment, while other sectors appear to have continued normal activities throughout the siege period and its aftermath. Persian conquest of the Babylonian Empire under Cyrus the Great created entirely new political conditions for Phoenician cities, as the Achaemenid administrative system emphasized local autonomy and commercial development rather than systematic tribute extraction. The Persian approach to imperial governance incorporated existing local institutions while providing security and infrastructure that facilitated long-distance trade. Archaeological evidence from Persian administrative centres shows sophisticated systems for managing diverse populations and commercial relationships throughout their vast empire. Integration of Phoenician cities into Persian satrapies allowed them to maintain considerable internal autonomy while contributing naval expertise and commercial services to Persian imperial objectives. The satrapy system divided the empire into manageable administrative units governed by Persian appointees who were responsible for maintaining order, collecting taxes, and providing military forces when required. Archaeological evidence suggests that Phoenician cities were incorporated into the fifth satrapy, which included Syria and Palestine, but retained special privileges related to their naval capabilities and commercial expertise, Persian naval requirements created unprecedented opportunities for Phoenician maritime specialists, as the Achaemenid Empire needed naval forces capable of operating throughout the Mediterranean and Indian Ocean regions. Phoenician ships and crews became essential components of Persian military campaigns, including the failed invasion of Greece under Xerxes. Archaeological evidence from Persian military installations includes Phoenician pottery, weapons, and naval equipment that indicates systematic integration of Phoenician naval resources into Persian military planning. The Persian period represented a golden age for Phoenician commercial activities, as imperial security and infrastructure improvements facilitated trade relationships spanning from India to Spain. The Persian road system, standardized currency, and diplomatic relationships created conditions that allowed Phoenician merchants to operate more efficiently and securely than ever before. Archaeological evidence from trading sites throughout the Persian Empire shows increased quantities of Phoenician goods and more sophisticated commercial installations that indicate expanded trade volumes and improved profitability. The construction of Persian administrative centres throughout Phoenician territories required local labour and expertise, while providing employment opportunities and technological exchanges that benefited local populations. Archaeological excavations at these sites reveal evidence of Persian architectural techniques combined with local construction methods, creating hybrid styles that influenced regional building practices for centuries. The integration of Persian administrative methods with local commercial practices created more sophisticated systems for managing complex economic relationships. Alexander the Great's invasion of the Persian Empire in 334 BC created the final crisis of Phoenician independence, as the Macedonian conqueror's military innovations and strategic objectives left no room for the autonomous commercial relationships that had characterized Persian rule. Alexander's siege of Tyre in 332 BC would demonstrate that even the most sophisticated defensive positions could not withstand the combination of military engineering, naval power, and unlimited resources that characterized Hellenistic warfare at its peak. The revolutionary impact of alphabetic writing and the establishment of Carthage as a major Mediterranean power created the foundation for what would become the most consequential conflict in ancient history, the struggle between Rome and Carthage for dominance over the western Mediterranean. By 264 BC, these two expanding powers had reached the point where their territorial ambitions and commercial interests could no longer coexist peacefully. The island of Sicily, strategically positioned between the Italian peninsula and North Africa, became the flashpoint that would ignite a series of wars spanning over a century and ultimately determine the future of Mediterranean civilization. The First Punic War erupted when Rome intervened in a local conflict between Syracuse and the Mamertines, a group of Italian mercenaries who had seized control of Messana. Carthage, which had maintained a protective presence over western Sicily for centuries, viewed Roman interference as a direct threat to their established sphere of influence. Archaeological evidence from Carthaginian settlements in western Sicily shows extensive fortifications and military installations that had been constructed over generations to secure their territorial holdings against Greek expansion from the eastern part of the island. The Roman decision to cross the Strait of Messina represented a fundamental shift in their strategic thinking, as they had previously focused their military efforts on consolidating control over the Italian peninsula. The Roman army that landed in Sicily consisted primarily of citizen soldiers organised in legions, with standardised equipment and training that differed markedly from the mercenary forces typically employed by Carthaginian commanders. Archaeological finds from early Roman military camps in Sicily reveal evidence of systematic organisation, including standardised tent layouts, cooking facilities, and equipment maintenance areas that indicate sophisticated logistical planning. Carthaginian forces defending Sicily employed a combination of professional soldiers, local recruits, and specialised units drawn from throughout their Mediterranean empire. Numidian cavalry provided exceptional mobility and reconnaissance capabilities, while Balearic slingers offered precise long-range attacks that could disrupt Roman infantry formations. Spanish infantry, equipped with distinctive weapons including the falcator sword and small round shields, brought different fighting techniques that complemented traditional Carthaginian tactics. Archaeological evidence from Carthaginian military sites includes weapons and equipment from these diverse sources, demonstrating the cosmopolitan character of their armed forces. The naval dimension of the First Punic War proved decisive, as control of the seas determined which side could maintain supply lines, reinforce besieged positions, and transport troops to strategic locations. Carthaginian naval supremacy had gone unchallenged in the Western Mediterranean for centuries, with their ships and crews possessing experience and technical knowledge that far exceeded Roman capabilities. Carthaginian warships featured sophisticated design elements, including bronze rams for attacking enemy vessels, specialized rigging for combat maneuvers, and trained crews who understood the complexities of Mediterranean navigation and weather patterns. Roman naval development during the First Punic War demonstrated their characteristic ability to adapt foreign technologies and techniques to their own purposes. Discovering a wrecked Carthaginian warship provided Roman shipwrights with a model for constructing their own fleet, but they modified the design to accommodate Roman tactical preferences. The addition of the corvus, a boarding bridge with a heavy spike that could be dropped onto enemy ships, transformed naval combat from ramming and manoeuvring to infantry fighting where Roman soldiers held clear advantages. The Battle of Mylae. In 260 BC marked Rome's first major naval victory and demonstrated the effectiveness of their tactical innovations. Roman ships used the corvus to lock onto Carthaginian vessels, preventing the superior seamanship of Carthaginian crews from determining the battle's outcome. Archaeological underwater surveys near the battle site have recovered bronze rams and other naval equipment that provide evidence of the intense fighting and technological sophistication of both fleets. The victory at Mylae gave Rome confidence to expand their naval operations, while forcing Carthaginian commanders to develop new tactics for dealing with Roman boarding techniques. The invasion of North Africa under Marcus Atilius Regulus represented Rome's most ambitious military undertaking to that point, requiring coordination of land and naval forces across hundreds of miles of Mediterranean waters. The Roman expeditionary force that landed near Carthage in 256 BC included approximately 15,000 infantry and 500 cavalry, supported by a fleet of over 300 ships. Archaeological evidence from the landing sites shows temporary fortifications and supply depots that indicate systematic preparation for extended operations in hostile territory. Regulus initially achieved significant success against Carthaginian forces, capturing several important cities and advancing to within striking distance of Carthage itself. The Roman tactical system proved effective against Carthaginian armies in open battle, with disciplined infantry formations and standardized equipment providing advantages that overcame Carthaginian numerical superiority and cavalry support. Archaeological finds from battle sites during this campaign include Roman weapons and equipment alongside Carthaginian artifacts, providing evidence of the fierce fighting and tactical evolution that characterized this phase of the war. The arrival of Xanthippus, a Spartan mercenary general, fundamentally altered the strategic situation in North Africa by introducing military reforms that maximize Carthaginian advantages while neutralizing Roman tactical superiority. Xanthippus reorganized Carthaginian forces to emphasize their cavalry and elephant units while avoiding the direct infantry confrontations that favored Roman legions. Archaeological evidence from Carthaginian military camps during this period shows changes in equipment and organization that reflect these tactical modifications. The Battle of Tunis in 255 BC demonstrated the effectiveness of reformed Carthaginian tactics, as Xanthippus deployed his forces on terrain that maximised the impact of cavalry charges and elephant attacks while limiting Roman infantry manoeuvrability. The Carthaginian army included approximately 100 war elephants, 4,000 cavalry, and 12,000 infantry arranged in formations that could coordinate their different capabilities effectively. Archaeological analysis of the battlefield has revealed evidence of the devastating impact of this combined arms approach, with Roman equipment scattered across areas that indicate rapid collapse of their formations. The destruction of Regulus's army and the capture of the Roman commander himself marked a turning point in the First Punic War, forcing Rome to abandon their African offensive and concentrate on defending Sicily and maintaining their naval capabilities. The loss of experienced troops and equipment in North Africa strained Roman resources while demonstrating that Carthaginian military capabilities remained formidable when properly organised and deployed. Archaeological evidence from Roman military installations during this period shows hasty fortification work and equipment shortages that indicate the impact of these losses. Naval warfare continued to dominate the conflict as both sides sought to control supply routes and strategic positions throughout the central Mediterranean. The Roman fleet suffered catastrophic losses during storms off the southern coast of Sicily, with ancient sources describing the destruction of entire squadrons due to inadequate seamanship and poor weather planning. Archaeological underwater surveys have located wreck sites that may correspond to these disasters, revealing evidence of Roman naval equipment and construction techniques alongside natural formations that indicate storm damage. Carthaginian naval operations during the later phases of the First Punic War focused on maintaining supply lines to their Sicilian strongholds while disrupting Roman communications between Italy and their forces on the island. Carthaginian commanders employed fast, maneuverable ships for raiding operations against Roman supply convoys, while concentrating larger vessels for major fleet actions when tactical conditions proved favourable. Archaeological evidence from Carthaginian naval bases shows sophisticated harbour installations, ship maintenance facilities, and storage areas for naval supplies that supported these extended operations. The siege of Lilybaeum represented the war's longest and most intensive military operation, lasting nearly 9 years as Roman forces attempted to capture Carthage's principal stronghold in western Sicily. The city's fortifications had been strengthened over generations of military threats, with massive stone walls, defensive towers, and harbour installations that could accommodate supply ships despite Roman blockade efforts. Archaeological excavations within the ancient city have revealed evidence of siege damage, including destroyed buildings, hastily constructed defensive works, and storage areas filled with military supplies. Roman siege techniques at Lilybaeum employed systematic approaches that had proven effective against other fortified cities, including construction of siege works, deployment of artillery engines, and attempts to undermine defensive walls. Archaeological evidence shows remnants of Roman siege installations, including stone foundations for catapults and ballistae, earthwork ramps for approaching the walls, and underground tunnels designed to collapse sections of the fortifications. The persistence required for these operations demonstrated Roman determination to achieve complete victory, despite enormous costs in time and resources. Carthaginian defence of Lilybaeum combined active resistance with diplomatic efforts to secure external support and maintain supply connections with North Africa. The city's harbour remained partially accessible throughout the siege, allowing supply ships to reach the defenders despite Roman naval patrols. Archaeological underwater surveys have revealed evidence of harbour defences, including submerged barriers and defensive installations designed to prevent Roman ships from entering the port while allowing Carthaginian vessels to navigate safely. The final phase of the First Punic War centred on the Battle of the Aegates Islands in 241 BC, where a rebuilt Roman fleet achieved decisive victory over Carthaginian naval forces attempting to relieve the siege of Lilybaeum. The Roman fleet that fought this battle incorporated lessons learned from previous defeats, with improved ship designs, better trained crews, and tactical modifications that reduced reliance on boarding actions. Archaeological evidence from the battle site includes bronze rams, anchors, and other naval equipment that provide insights into the ships and weapons employed by both sides. The Carthaginian defeat at the Aegates Islands resulted from a combination of factors including inadequate preparation time for their relief expedition, overloading of ships with supplies for the besieged garrison, and Roman tactical improvements that neutralised traditional Carthaginian naval advantages. The loss of this fleet eliminated Carthage's ability to maintain their Sicilian strongholds, forcing them to negotiate peace terms that acknowledged Roman dominance over the island. Archaeological evidence from Carthaginian sites in Sicily shows abandonment and destruction during this period, indicating the systematic withdrawal of Carthaginian forces and civilian populations. The peace treaty that ended the First Punic War required Carthage to evacuate all territories in Sicily, pay substantial war reparations over 20 years, and acknowledge Roman control over the island's strategic resources. The indemnity payments totaled 3,200 talents of silver, an enormous sum that strained Carthaginian finances, while providing Rome with resources for further military expansion. Archaeological evidence from Carthaginian territories shows economic disruption during this period, including reduced construction activity, simplified pottery production, and evidence of population decline that indicate the war's devastating impact. The mercenary war that erupted immediately after the First Punic War's conclusion revealed fundamental weaknesses in Carthaginian military and social organisation that would plague them throughout subsequent conflicts. The mercenary forces that had served Carthage during the Sicilian campaign included soldiers from throughout the Mediterranean world: Libyans, Numidians, Iberians, Gauls, and others whose loyalty depended entirely on regular payment and successful military outcomes. Archaeological evidence from mercenary camps shows the diverse equipment and cultural artifacts of these varied forces, demonstrating the challenge of maintaining unity among such disparate groups. The immediate cause of the mercenary revolt involved disputes over pay and demobilization arrangements, as Carthaginian authorities attempted to reduce military expenses while managing the financial strain of Roman war reparations. The mercenary forces that had been transported from Sicily to North Africa included approximately 20,000 soldiers with their families and support personnel, creating a substantial population that required feeding, housing, and payment during the demobilization process. Archaeological evidence from camps near Carthage shows temporary installations that were clearly inadequate for long-term occupation, contributing to tensions that eventually exploded into open revolt. The social tensions underlying the mercenary war reflected deeper problems within Carthaginian society, particularly the relationship between the ruling merchant elite and the diverse populations that comprised their empire. The mercenary soldiers who rebelled against Carthaginian authority found support among native Libyan populations who had long resented Carthaginian taxation and control over their traditional territories. Archaeological evidence from Libyan settlements during this period shows evidence of military activity and social disruption that indicates widespread participation in the anti-Carthaginian uprising. Hamilcar Barca emerged as the Carthaginian commander responsible for suppressing the mercenary revolt, employing tactics that combined military force with diplomatic manipulation, designed to divide the rebel coalition and isolate its most dangerous elements. His approach involved offering amnesty to some mercenary groups while conducting ruthless campaigns against others, creating uncertainty within rebel ranks about their ultimate fate. Archaeological evidence from battle sites during this conflict shows evidence of intense fighting and the systematic destruction of rebel strongholds that indicates the war's brutal character. The suppression of the mercenary war required 3 years of continuous military operations that further strained Carthaginian resources while demonstrating the empire's fundamental dependence on military force for maintaining control over subject populations. The cost of these operations, combined with ongoing Roman reparations, created financial pressures that would influence Carthaginian strategic decisions for decades. Archaeological evidence from Carthaginian territories shows continued economic difficulties during this period, including reduced trade activities and simplified production techniques that reflect resource constraints. The resolution of the Mercenary War marked the beginning of a new phase in Phoenician cultural development, as the pressures of military conflict and territorial expansion created unprecedented opportunities for artistic innovation and technological advancement. The wealth generated by Carthaginian expansion into Iberia, combined with the diverse cultural influences encountered through their Mediterranean empire, fostered a renaissance in Phoenician artistic production that would influence Mediterranean aesthetics for centuries to come. Phoenician metalwork during this period achieved levels of sophistication that surpassed even their earlier renowned productions. Archaeological excavations at workshops in Carthage and the homeland cities reveal evidence of advanced techniques for working gold, silver and bronze that incorporated influences from across their trading network. The famous Phoenician bowls found in Assyrian palaces represent the pinnacle of this artistic tradition, featuring complex narrative scenes executed with extraordinary technical precision. These vessels, typically measuring 20-25 centimeters in diameter, display concentric bands of decoration that combine Egyptian mythological motifs with Mesopotamian royal imagery and distinctively Phoenician maritime themes. The production of these elaborate silver bowls required mastery of multiple metalworking techniques, including repousse work, where designs were hammered from the reverse side to create raised relief patterns, and chasing, where surface details were refined using specialized tools. Archaeological analysis of workshop debris reveals evidence of the various stages involved in creating these masterpieces. Craftsmen began with silver sheets of uniform thickness, carefully annealed to prevent cracking during the forming process. The decorative scenes were sketched onto the metal surface using carbon-based pigments before the actual metalwork began, ensuring precise placement of narrative elements within the available space. The iconographic programs displayed on Phoenician metalwork demonstrate sophisticated understanding of foreign artistic traditions, combined with distinctive local interpretations. Egyptian-inspired scenes typically featured pharaonic figures, divine barks, and ceremonial processions, but Phoenician craftsmen modified these traditional motifs to emphasize commercial and maritime themes relevant to their own culture. Mesopotamian influences appear in depictions of royal hunts, tribute processions, and divine investiture ceremonies, again adapted to reflect Phoenician values and experiences. The synthesis of these diverse influences created a distinctive orientalizing style that would profoundly influence Greek and Etruscan art during the 8th and 7th centuries BC. Ivory carving represented another area where Phoenician artisans achieved exceptional technical and artistic excellence. The raw material for these luxury objects came primarily from African elephants, obtained through trade networks extending deep into the continent's interior. Archaeological evidence from Carthaginian workshops shows that ivory workers possessed detailed knowledge of the material's properties, understanding how to work with the natural grain patterns while avoiding the cracking and splitting that could ruin expensive pieces. The tools employed included bronze knives, chisels and scrapers of various sizes, along with abrasives for polishing finished surfaces to achieve the lustrous finish, prized by wealthy customers. Phoenician ivory carvings frequently served as decorative elements for furniture, particularly the elaborate thrones and couches used by royal and aristocratic patrons throughout the Mediterranean world. Archaeological discoveries at sites like Nimrud have revealed ivory plaques that originally decorated Assyrian palace furniture, featuring Phoenician artistic motifs and technical characteristics. These plaques, typically measuring 10-15 centimeters in height, display scenes of divine protection, royal authority and natural abundance executed with extraordinary attention to detail. The faces of human figures show individualized features rather than generic types, while clothing and jewelry display patterns that correspond to actual textiles and metalwork known from archaeological contexts. The technical challenges involved in ivory carving required specialized knowledge passed down through family workshops over multiple generations. The material's organic nature meant that craftsmen had to account for seasonal changes in humidity and temperature that could cause dimensional changes in partially completed pieces. Archaeological analysis of workshop spaces reveals evidence of controlled environments where ivory objects were stored during the carving process, including sealed containers and climate-controlled chambers that maintained optimal conditions for working the material. The investment in such sophisticated facilities demonstrates the high value placed on ivory craftsmanship and the substantial profits generated by luxury production. Glass production in Phoenician cities reached new heights of technical achievement during this period, with archaeological evidence indicating innovations in both manufacturing techniques and artistic applications. The primary centres of glass production remained at Sidon and Tyre, where abundant supplies of high-quality sand provided ideal raw materials. Chemical analysis of glass fragments from Phoenician sites reveals sophisticated understanding of the additives needed to produce different colours and optical properties. Cobalt compounds created deep blue glasses, while copper oxides produced various shades of red and green, depending on furnace conditions and cooling procedures. The furnace technology employed by Phoenician glassmakers incorporated design features that allowed precise temperature control, essential for producing high-quality transparent glass. Archaeological excavations have revealed furnace structures with multiple chambers, including primary firing areas where raw materials were melted, secondary chambers for refining the molten glass, and cooling areas where finished pieces were gradually brought to room temperature. The fuel requirements for these operations were substantial, with evidence indicating that specialized charcoal production supported the glass industry's energy needs. The coordination required between fuel suppliers, raw material procurement, and skilled craftsmen demonstrates the sophisticated organization underlying Phoenician glass production. Phoenician innovations in glassworking included the development of techniques for creating vessels with complex shapes and decorative elements that had previously been impossible to achieve. Archaeological finds include examples of glass vessels with multiple colours arranged in intricate patterns, indicating mastery of techniques for combining different coloured glasses while they remained in molten state. Some pieces display evidence of gold leaf application, where thin sheets of precious metal were incorporated into the glass surface during the forming process. These luxury items commanded extremely high prices in Mediterranean markets, contributing significantly to the wealth of Phoenician cities while establishing their reputation for technical innovation. The distinctive orientalizing influence of Phoenician artistic traditions extended far beyond their own territories through the commercial networks that distributed their products throughout the Mediterranean world. Greek pottery from the 8th and 7th centuries BC shows clear evidence of Phoenician artistic influence, with decorative motifs, narrative scenes, and technical approaches that derive directly from Phoenician prototypes. The transmission of these artistic ideas occurred through multiple channels, including direct trade in Phoenician luxury goods, the presence of Phoenician craftsmen in foreign cities, and the adaptation of Phoenician techniques by local artisans who had observed their methods. Etruscan art provides particularly clear evidence of Phoenician artistic influence, with archaeological finds revealing direct copies of Phoenician metalwork alongside local adaptations that incorporate Phoenician motifs into distinctively Etruscan artistic programs. The famous Bernardini tomb at Praeneste contained numerous examples of Phoenician metalwork alongside local imitations, demonstrating both the high regard in which Phoenician craftsmanship was held and the active process of artistic transmission that characterized Mediterranean cultural exchange during this period. The technical quality of Etruscan imitations indicates that Phoenician craftsmen may have established workshops in Etruscan cities, training local artisans in their specialised techniques. Religious practices within Phoenician cities during this period reflected the same cosmopolitan influences that characterised their artistic production, with archaeological evidence revealing complex ritual systems that incorporated elements from throughout their Mediterranean empire. The pantheon worshipped in Phoenician cities combined traditional Canaanite deities with foreign gods, encountered through commercial and diplomatic relationships, creating syncretic religious traditions that reflected their multicultural society. Temple architecture from this period shows influences from Egyptian, Mesopotamian, and local Mediterranean building traditions, with archaeological excavations revealing sophisticated construction techniques and elaborate decorative programs. The cult of Baal remained central to Phoenician religious life, particularly in his role as protector of maritime activities and commercial ventures. Archaeological evidence from Baal temples shows that worshippers offered model ships, anchors, and other maritime equipment, seeking divine protection for sea voyages and commercial expeditions. The temple complex at Tyre included specialised facilities for storing and displaying these offerings, with archaeological finds revealing thousands of miniature bronze objects representing ships, weapons, and tools. The standardised production of these votive offerings indicates organised workshop systems dedicated to religious manufacturing, with specialised craftsmen producing ritual objects according to established iconographic and technical requirements. Astarte's cult incorporated influences from throughout the Mediterranean world, while maintaining distinctively Phoenician characteristics that reflected local cultural values and practices. Her temple served as centres for community religious activities, with archaeological evidence revealing large public spaces capable of accommodating substantial congregations during major festivals. The temple complex at Sidon included residential quarters for priests and temple personnel, workshops for producing ritual objects, and storage facilities for the substantial wealth accumulated through religious donations. Inscriptions describe elaborate festival processions that attracted pilgrims from throughout the Phoenician world, creating opportunities for cultural exchange and commercial activity that extended far beyond purely religious purposes. Melkort's cult at Tyre represented the divine aspect of royal authority and commercial success, with ritual practices that symbolically renewed the king's power and blessed the community's economic activities. Archaeological excavations at Melkort's temple have revealed evidence of animal sacrifices conducted on a massive scale, including specialised facilities for slaughtering cattle, sheep, and exotic animals obtained through international trade networks. The temple's annual festival, celebrated in early spring, involved elaborate ceremonies that attracted participants from throughout the Mediterranean world. The economic impact of these religious gatherings contributed significantly to Tyre's prosperity while reinforcing the city's position as a major pilgrimage destination. The controversial question of child sacrifice in Phoenician religious practices continues to generate scholarly debate, with archaeological evidence providing ambiguous information that supports various interpretations. Excavations at sites like the Tophet at Carthage have revealed thousands of urns containing cremated infant remains, but determining whether these represent sacrificial victims or natural deaths remains challenging. The archaeological context of these burials includes elaborate grave goods and monumental markers that indicate significant investment in mortuary practices. But the specific circumstances surrounding the deaths cannot be definitively established from physical evidence alone. Textual evidence from classical sources describes Phoenician child sacrifice in vivid detail, but these accounts may reflect anti-Phoenician propaganda rather than accurate reporting of religious practices. Roman authors, writing during periods of intense military conflict with Carthage, had obvious motivations for portraying their enemies as practitioners of barbarous customs that justified Roman military intervention. Archaeological analysis of infant burials from Phoenician homeland cities reveals different patterns than those found at Carthage, suggesting that practices may have varied significantly between different communities and time periods. Recent archaeological work has focused on scientific analysis of cremated remains to determine age at death, health status, and other factors that might clarify the circumstances surrounding these burials. Preliminary results suggest that many of the infants died from natural causes rather than deliberate killing, but the sample sizes remain too small for definitive conclusions. The elaborate nature of the burial practices and the substantial investment in cemetery infrastructure indicate that these were important religious activities regardless of the specific circumstances surrounding individual deaths. Literature and intellectual contributions from Phoenician civilization remain poorly preserved due to the perishable nature of their primary writing materials and the systematic destruction that accompanied various military conquests. However, archaeological evidence and references in foreign sources provide glimpses of sophisticated intellectual traditions that influence Mediterranean culture far beyond their territorial boundaries. The development of historical writing appears to have begun early in Phoenician cities, with temple records and royal chronicles providing the foundation for more elaborate narrative accounts of political and military events. Phoenician historical records, known primarily through references in Greek and Roman sources, included detailed accounts of colonial foundations, military campaigns, and diplomatic relationships that provided models for later Mediterranean historiography. The priest Sanchuniathon of Beirut reportedly compiled comprehensive accounts of Phoenician religious traditions and mythological beliefs, though his works survive only in fragments quoted by later authors. Archaeological evidence suggests that major temples maintained extensive archives that included not only administrative records, but also literary and religious texts that preserved cultural knowledge across generations. The influence of Phoenician intellectual traditions on later Mediterranean cultures appears most clearly in the transmission of mythological and religious concepts that were incorporated into Greek and Roman literature. Stories of divine conflicts, heroic journeys, and cultural origins found in Greek sources show clear parallels with Near Eastern traditions that were likely transmitted through Phoenician intermediaries. The cosmopolitan character of Phoenician society, with its extensive international contacts and multilingual population, created ideal conditions for cultural synthesis and intellectual exchange that enriched Mediterranean civilization as a whole. Scientific and technical knowledge preserved in Phoenician traditions included sophisticated understanding of navigation, metallurgy, and chemical processes that facilitated their maritime dominance and commercial success. Navigation techniques combined systematic astronomical observation with empirical knowledge of wind patterns, current flows, and seasonal weather variations that allowed Phoenician mariners to traverse vast oceanic distances with remarkable precision. Archaeological evidence suggests that this knowledge was preserved in written form, though no complete sailing manuals have survived to modern times. Metallurgical expertise developed by Phoenician craftsmen included advanced techniques for alloy production, metal purification, and specialized applications that were closely guarded trade secrets. The production of Tyrian purple required sophisticated understanding of chemical processes involving extraction, fermentation, and concentration of dye materials from marine organisms. Archaeological analysis of dye workshops reveals evidence of systematic experimentation with different processing techniques designed to optimize color intensity and durability. The technical knowledge required for these operations was passed down through family workshops and craft guilds that maintained professional standards across generations. The sophisticated engineering projects and technical innovations that characterize the height of Phoenician civilization provided the foundation for their adaptation to the radically transformed political landscape that emerged following Alexander the Great's conquest of the Persian Empire. The Macedonian king's siege of Tyre in 332 BC had demonstrated that even the most formidable defensive positions could not withstand the combination of military engineering, unlimited resources, and strategic persistence that characterized Hellenistic warfare. However, the destruction of Tyre's independence did not mark the end of Phoenician cultural influence, but rather initiated a complex process of adaptation and transformation that would continue for over a millennium. Alexander's construction of a causeway connecting the island of Tyre to the mainland represented one of the most ambitious engineering projects of the ancient world, requiring the coordination of thousands of workers and massive quantities of materials over several months. Archaeological underwater surveys around modern Tyre have revealed remnants of this construction, including stone blocks, wooden pilings, and debris from demolished buildings that Alexander's forces used as fill material. The causeway's construction fundamentally altered the city's relationship with the sea, eliminating the natural defences that had protected Tyre for centuries, while creating new opportunities for land-based commerce and urban development. The Hellenistic kingdoms that emerged from Alexander's empire created unprecedented opportunities for Phoenician cities to integrate Greek cultural elements while maintaining their distinctive commercial identities. The Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt actively courted Phoenician merchants and craftsmen, recognizing their expertise in maritime trade and luxury production as valuable assets for developing Alexandria as a major commercial centre. Archaeological evidence from Ptolemaic Alexandria includes Phoenician pottery, inscriptions, and architectural elements that indicate substantial Phoenician populations working within the new Hellenistic economic system. Phoenician adaptation to Ptolemaic rule involved selective adoption of Greek cultural practices while preserving essential elements of their traditional identity. Bilingual inscriptions from this period show Phoenician names rendered in Greek script alongside traditional Phoenician writing, indicating the practical bilingualism that characterized educated Phoenicians during the Hellenistic period. The content of these inscriptions reveals continued devotion to traditional Phoenician deities, while acknowledging Greek gods and adopting Greek artistic motifs in religious and funerary contexts. The Seleucid Empire, controlling the Phoenician homeland cities, pursued different policies toward local populations that emphasized administrative integration, while allowing considerable cultural autonomy. Seleucid rulers appointed Greek governors to major cities but relied heavily on local elites for day-to-day administration and commercial management. Archaeological evidence from Seleucid administrative centres shows Greek architectural elements combined with traditional Phoenician building techniques, creating hybrid styles that reflected the complex cultural negotiations occurring throughout the empire. Economic opportunities within the Seleucid system allowed Phoenician merchants to expand their trading networks while adapting to new commercial practices and administrative requirements. The standardized currency systems introduced by Hellenistic rulers facilitated long-distance trade by eliminating the complex exchange calculations that had previously characterized international commerce. Archaeological finds of Seleucid coins at Phoenician sites show active participation in the new monetary economy, while continued production of traditional Phoenician goods indicates that local industries adapted successfully to Hellenistic market demands. Cultural synthesis during the Hellenistic period created new forms of artistic expression that combined Greek aesthetic principles with traditional Phoenician craftsmanship and iconography. Sculptural works from this period show Greek influence in their naturalistic representation of human figures while maintaining Phoenician preferences for narrative scenes and symbolic content. Archaeological excavations at Phoenician sites have revealed terracotta figurines, relief sculptures, and decorative objects that demonstrate sophisticated fusion of Greek and Phoenician artistic traditions. Religious practices in Hellenistic Phoenician cities evolved through complex processes of syncretism that identified traditional Phoenician deities with Greek gods while maintaining distinctive ritual practices and theological concepts. Melkort of Tyre became associated with Heracles, creating composite religious traditions that appealed to both Phoenician and Greek populations. Archaeological evidence from temples during this period shows architectural modifications that incorporated Greek design elements while preserving traditional Phoenician ritual spaces and ceremonial requirements. Educational systems in Hellenistic Phoenician cities combined Greek pedagogical methods with traditional Phoenician commercial and technical training, creating hybrid educational approaches that prepared young people for success in the cosmopolitan Hellenistic world. Archaeological evidence suggests that gymnasiums and schools operated alongside traditional craft workshops and merchant training programs, providing diverse educational opportunities that reflected the complex cultural environment of Hellenistic cities. The Roman conquest of the Eastern Mediterranean created new challenges and opportunities for Phoenician cities as they adapted to yet another imperial system with different administrative methods and cultural expectations. Roman appreciation for Greek culture initially created advantages for Hellenized Phoenician cities, whose populations possessed the linguistic skills and cultural knowledge that Romans valued in their eastern territories. Archaeological evidence from early Roman period sites shows continued prosperity and urban development that indicates successful adaptation to Roman rule. Roman administrative practices incorporated Phoenician cities into the provincial system, while allowing considerable local autonomy in matters of commerce, religion, and cultural practice. The transformation of major Phoenician cities into Roman municipalities involved adoption of Roman legal structures and governmental institutions, while preserving traditional commercial networks and craft production systems. Archaeological excavations have revealed Roman-style public buildings, including theatres, baths and forums, constructed alongside traditional Phoenician temples and commercial facilities. Municipal status under Roman rule provided Phoenician cities with legal privileges and administrative autonomy that facilitated continued commercial success, while integrating them into the broader Roman economic system. The ius latii granted to many Phoenician cities allowed their leading citizens to acquire Roman citizenship through service in local magistracies, creating incentives for political participation while maintaining connections to traditional Phoenician identity. Inscriptional evidence shows Phoenician families adopting Roman names while continuing to practice traditional occupations and maintain ancestral religious observances. Roman infrastructure development throughout former Phoenician territories included construction of roads, harbours, and public buildings that enhanced commercial opportunities while facilitating cultural integration. The Via Domitia, connecting Spain with Italy, passed through former Phoenician territories, bringing increased trade traffic and cultural exchange to cities along the route. Archaeological evidence shows that Roman road construction often followed earlier Phoenician trade routes, indicating Roman recognition of the strategic value of established commercial networks. Harbour improvements undertaken by Roman engineers enhanced the commercial capabilities of Phoenician ports, while adapting them to accommodate larger Roman ships and increase traffic volumes. Archaeological underwater surveys at Caesarea Maritima, built on the site of an earlier Phoenician settlement, reveal massive concrete constructions that employed Roman engineering techniques while serving the same commercial functions that had characterized Phoenician ports for centuries. The integration of Roman engineering capabilities with traditional Phoenician commercial expertise created port facilities that surpassed anything previously achieved in the Mediterranean world. Urban development in Roman period Phoenician cities reflected the complex cultural negotiations between Roman administrative requirements and local traditions. Archaeological excavations at Berytus reveal a city plan that incorporated Roman urban design principles while preserving traditional Phoenician commercial quarters and religious precincts. The construction of Roman-style public buildings provided venues for civic activities that combined Roman governmental functions with traditional Phoenician community practices. Commercial law under Roman rule standardized many aspects of Mediterranean trade, while preserving traditional Phoenician commercial practices that had proven effective over centuries of international business. Roman legal concepts provided frameworks for resolving disputes and enforcing contracts across vast distances, while traditional Phoenician commercial relationships continue to operate within these new legal structures. Archaeological evidence includes legal documents written in both Latin and Phoenician that demonstrate the practical bilingualism required for successful commercial operations under Roman rule. The persistence of Phoenician identity under Roman rule manifested in various forms of cultural expression that maintained connections to ancestral traditions while adapting to new political and social circumstances. Funerary inscriptions from the Roman period show continued use of Phoenician names, religious formulae, and artistic motifs alongside Roman legal terminology and social conventions. Archaeological analysis of burial practices reveals combinations of Roman and Phoenician customs that reflect the complex cultural negotiations occurring within Romanized Phoenician communities. Religious syncretism during the Roman period created new forms of worship that combined traditional Phoenician deities with Roman gods, while incorporating mystery religions and philosophical concepts that appeal to cosmopolitan urban populations. The cult of Jupiter Optimus Maximus Heliopolitanus at Baalbek represented a synthesis of Roman Jupiter with local Baal worship that attracted devotees from throughout the eastern Mediterranean. Archaeological excavations at the Baalbek temple complex reveal massive construction projects that employed Roman engineering techniques to create ritual spaces designed according to traditional Near Eastern religious concepts. Mystery religions gained particular popularity in former Phoenician territories during the Roman period, with archaeological evidence indicating active participation in cults of Mithras, Cybele, and other deities that promised personal salvation and spiritual transformation. The appeal of these religions to Phoenician populations may have reflected their traditional openness to foreign religious influences, combined with the personal spiritual needs created by rapid cultural change and political uncertainty. Early Christian communities in former Phoenician territories built upon existing networks of cultural diversity and religious syncretism while drawing on traditional Phoenician openness to foreign ideas and practices. Archaeological evidence from early Christian sites shows architectural elements and artistic motifs that combine Christian symbolism with traditional Phoenician decorative traditions. The cosmopolitan character of Phoenician cities provided favourable conditions for Christian missionary activities, while established commercial networks facilitated the rapid spread of Christian ideas throughout the Mediterranean world. The conversion process in Phoenician territories involved complex negotiations between Christian theological concepts and traditional religious practices that had evolved over centuries of cultural synthesis. Archaeological evidence suggests that Christian communities initially coexisted with traditional religious practices, rather than replacing them entirely. Church buildings from the 4th and 5th centuries AD show architectural features that accommodate both Christian liturgical requirements and traditional community gathering practices that had characterized Phoenician urban life. Phoenician contributions to early Christian development included theological concepts, organizational structures, and missionary techniques that drew on centuries of experience with religious diversity and cultural adaptation. The theological schools that developed in cities like Beirut and Caesarea combined Christian doctrine with philosophical traditions that had been preserved in Phoenician intellectual centres throughout the Hellenistic and Roman periods. Archaeological evidence suggests that these schools maintained libraries and scriptoriums that preserved both Christian texts and classical works that might otherwise have been lost. Christian art and architecture in former Phoenician territories incorporated traditional Phoenician artistic motifs and construction techniques while adapting them to Christian symbolic requirements. Mosaic floors in early churches showed decorative patterns and narrative scenes that combine Christian iconography with artistic traditions that can be traced back to ancient Phoenician craftsmanship. The technical expertise required for these elaborate decorative programs indicates continuity of artistic traditions despite fundamental changes in religious content and meaning. Monastic communities that developed in former Phoenician territories drew on traditional Phoenician practices of religious dedication, while adapting them to Christian theological frameworks. Archaeological excavations at monastic sites reveal architectural layouts and material culture that show influences from traditional Phoenician religious practices combined with Christian ascetic ideals. The economic activities of these communities often continued traditional Phoenician craft production and commercial practices while directing profits toward religious rather than secular purposes. The gradual transformation of Phoenician cultural identity during the early Christian period involved complex processes of adaptation and preservation that varied significantly between different communities and geographic regions. Urban centres with strong Roman administrative presence experienced more rapid cultural change than rural areas where traditional practices could persist with less external pressure. Archaeological evidence shows that Phoenician language continued to be used in some contexts well into the medieval period, particularly in religious and commercial settings where traditional terminology retained practical value. Cultural persistence manifested in various forms of material culture, social practices and intellectual traditions that maintained connections to Phoenician heritage while adapting to new political and religious circumstances. Traditional craft techniques, commercial relationships, and family structures continued to operate within Christian communities, while gradually incorporating new symbolic meanings and social functions. Archaeological analysis of domestic sites from the 5th and 6th centuries AD reveals combinations of traditional and Christian material culture that reflect the complex cultural negotiations occurring within individual households and communities. The survival of Phoenician customs and identity into the early medieval period demonstrates the resilience of cultural traditions that had developed over more than a millennium of adaptation to changing political circumstances. While the political independence of Phoenician cities had ended with Roman conquest, the cultural innovations and social practices they had developed continued to influence Mediterranean civilization long after their territorial boundaries had disappeared. The alphabetic writing system, commercial practices, artistic traditions, and religious concepts that had emerged from Phoenician civilization remained embedded in the cultural foundations of the medieval Mediterranean world. The systematic rediscovery of Phoenician civilization began in earnest during the 19th century as European archaeologists and explorers, driven by colonial interests and scholarly curiosity, began excavating sites throughout the Mediterranean basin. The French expedition to Tunisia in 1881 marked a crucial turning point in Phoenician archaeology, as systematic excavations at Carthage revealed the extent and sophistication of Punic urban planning, engineering, and material culture. Cardinal Charles Lavigerie, who supervised the initial excavations, uncovered massive stone foundations, elaborate mosaic floors, and thousands of artifacts that demonstrated the advanced civilization that had once dominated Western Mediterranean commerce. The excavation techniques employed during these early investigations, while primitive by modern standards, revealed architectural complexes of unprecedented scale and sophistication. The Carthaginian harbour installations discovered by French archaeologists included the famous circular military port capable of accommodating over 200 warships, with individual ship sheds arranged around a central island that housed naval administrative buildings. The rectangular commercial harbour adjacent to the military facility featured stone quays, warehouse foundations, and loading facilities that could handle merchant vessels from throughout the Mediterranean world. These discoveries fundamentally altered scholarly understanding of Carthaginian naval capabilities and commercial organisation. British archaeological expeditions to the Levantine coast during the late 19th and early 20th centuries focused on uncovering the homeland cities that had spawned the Phoenician colonial empire. Excavations at Tyre, directed by the Palestine Exploration Fund, revealed layers of occupation extending back to the Bronze Age, with successive building phases documenting the city's evolution from a modest Canaanite settlement to the greatest maritime power of the ancient world. The discovery of massive harbour installations, including underwater stone blocks weighing several tons each, demonstrated the engineering capabilities that had enabled Tyre's dominance over Mediterranean trade routes. Archaeological work at Sidon revealed different aspects of Phoenician civilization, particularly their renowned metalworking industries and luxury craft production. Excavations in the city's ancient commercial quarter uncovered workshop areas with bronze-working furnaces, silver refining installations, and specialized tools for producing the elaborate metalwork that had made Phoenician craftsmen famous throughout the ancient world. Chemical analysis of slag deposits and metal fragments provided insights into the technical processes employed by Phoenician metallurgists, revealing sophisticated understanding of alloy compositions and temperature control that enabled them to produce superior bronze and silver objects. The German Archaeological Institute's excavations at Byblos beginning in 1921 under the direction of Maurice Dunand revealed one of the most complete sequences of ancient Near Eastern urban development ever uncovered. The site's stratigraphy documented continuous occupation from Neolithic times through the Roman period, with particularly rich deposits from the Bronze and Iron Ages that illuminated the transition from Canaanite to Phoenician culture. The discovery of the famous Byblos syllabic inscriptions provided crucial evidence for understanding the development of alphabetic writing, while elaborate royal tombs revealed the wealth and artistic sophistication of Phoenician elite culture. Spanish archaeological investigations at Phoenician colonial sites revealed the extent of their territorial expansion and the sophistication of their mining operations. Excavations at Gadir uncovered evidence of planned urban development dating to the 8th century BC, with residential quarters, industrial areas, and religious precincts arranged according to systematic city planning principles. The discovery of silver refining installations and standardized ingot molds demonstrated the industrial scale of Phoenician mining operations in Iberia, while imported pottery and luxury goods revealed the extent of their commercial networks connecting Atlantic and Mediterranean markets. Archaeological work at colonial sites throughout the Western Mediterranean revealed consistent patterns of Phoenician settlement and cultural adaptation that illuminated their colonial strategies and administrative methods. Excavations at Motia in Sicily uncovered a fortified island city with sophisticated harbour installations, defensive walls, and urban infrastructure that served as a major base for Phoenician operations in the central Mediterranean. The site's material culture showed combinations of Phoenician traditions with local influences, demonstrating the cultural synthesis that characterized Phoenician colonial communities. Underwater archaeology emerged as a crucial tool for understanding Phoenician maritime capabilities and commercial practices. Shipwreck excavations off the coasts of France, Spain, and North Africa revealed Phoenician vessels with their original cargoes intact, providing unprecedented insights into ancient Mediterranean trade. The Cape Gelidonia wreck, dating to around 1200 BC, contained copper and tin ingots, bronze tools, and personal possessions that documented the transition from Bronze Age to Iron Age commercial practices. Later wrecks revealed standardized amphora types, specialized ship equipment, and navigation instruments that illuminated the technical aspects of Phoenician seamanship. The linguistic legacy of Phoenician civilization extends far beyond their direct territorial boundaries through the alphabetic writing system that became the foundation for most modern scripts. Comparative linguistic analysis has traced the development of Greek, Latin, Arabic, and Hebrew writing systems back to Phoenician prototypes, demonstrating the revolutionary impact of their phonetic innovation. The simplification from complex syllabic and logographic systems to a manageable set of consonantal letters democratized literacy throughout the Mediterranean world, enabling broader populations to participate in written communication and record-keeping. Modern epigraphic studies have revealed the extent of Phoenician linguistic influence through inscriptions discovered at sites throughout the Mediterranean basin and beyond. Phoenician texts found in Spain, North Africa, Sardinia, and the eastern Mediterranean demonstrate the geographical spread of their language, while revealing dialectal variations that developed in different colonial communities. Bilingual inscriptions combining Phoenician with Greek, Latin, or local languages provide crucial evidence for understanding cultural interaction and the gradual transformation of Phoenician communities under foreign rule. The economic contributions of Phoenician civilization to Mediterranean development involved far more than simple commercial exchange. Their standardization of weights, measures, and commercial practices created frameworks for international trade that persisted long after their political independence ended. Archaeological evidence shows remarkable consistency in Phoenician commercial standards across vast distances, indicating systematic organization that facilitated economic integration throughout the Mediterranean world. The commercial law concepts they developed influenced Roman legal traditions and medieval commercial practices that shaped European economic development. Phoenician innovations in maritime technology revolutionized Mediterranean navigation and shipbuilding, with their technical advances spreading throughout the ancient world through commercial and cultural contact. Their development of improved hull construction, rigging systems, and navigation techniques enabled longer voyages and larger cargo capacities that transformed the scale and efficiency of ancient commerce. Archaeological analysis of ancient shipwrecks reveals the gradual adoption of Phoenician shipbuilding techniques by other Mediterranean cultures, demonstrating the practical value of their maritime innovations. The role of Phoenician merchants as cultural intermediaries facilitated the transmission of technologies, artistic styles, and intellectual concepts between distant civilizations. Their commercial networks connected the Atlantic coast of Europe with the Indian Ocean, carrying not only trade goods but also ideas, techniques, and cultural practices that enrich societies throughout this vast region. Archaeological evidence shows Phoenician influence in metallurgy, textile production, agricultural techniques, and urban planning practices that spread far beyond their direct territorial control. Cultural exchange facilitated by Phoenician commercial activities created synthesis traditions that combined elements from multiple civilizations into new forms of artistic and intellectual expression. The Orientalizing period in Greek art reflects direct Phoenician influence, with decorative motifs, narrative techniques, and luxury production methods adopted from Phoenician models. Similar influences appear in Etruscan, Iberian, and North African cultures that encountered Phoenician merchants and craftsmen, creating hybrid traditions that enriched Mediterranean cultural diversity. Modern scholarly debates about Phoenician identity reflect broader questions about ethnicity, culture, and political organization in the ancient world. Some historians argue that Phoenician represents a Greek designation for diverse Canaanite populations, rather than a unified ethnic or political identity, while others maintain that shared language, religious practices, and commercial culture created genuine cultural unity despite political fragmentation. Archaeological evidence supports both perspectives, revealing common cultural elements alongside significant regional variations that complicate simple definitions of Phoenician identity. Recent archaeological discoveries continue to reshape understanding of Phoenician civilization and its historical impact. Excavations at Tel el-Burak in Lebanon have revealed evidence of Phoenician settlement dating to the 8th century BC, with urban planning and material culture that provide new insights into homeland development during the colonial period. The discovery of Phoenician inscriptions at sites in Turkey and the Black Sea region has expanded understanding of their geographical range and commercial networks beyond previously known boundaries. Scientific analysis of Phoenician artifacts using modern techniques has revealed technical knowledge and manufacturing processes that were previously unknown. Isotopic analysis of metals has traced the sources of raw materials used in Phoenician production, revealing supply networks that extended from Britain to Afghanistan. Chemical analysis of purple dye residues has confirmed ancient descriptions of the complex production processes while revealing variations in techniques employed at different production centres. Digital archaeology and remote sensing technologies have revolutionised the study of Phoenician sites, revealing urban layouts and harbour installations that were previously invisible. Satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar have identified potential Phoenician sites in remote locations, while providing detailed maps of known settlements without destructive excavation. These technological advances have accelerated the pace of discovery, while enabling more precise analysis of spatial relationships and urban development patterns. The question of Phoenician influence on later civilizations remains an active area of scholarly research, with new evidence continually emerging that demonstrates their lasting impact on Mediterranean and Atlantic cultures. Recent studies of medieval Iberian commercial practices have revealed continuities with Phoenician traditions that persisted through Roman and Islamic periods. Similarly, analysis of North African urban development shows influences from Carthaginian city planning that continued to shape settlement patterns long after the fall of the Punic state. Contemporary archaeological work at Phoenician sites faces challenges from urban development, political instability, and climate change that threaten the preservation of important cultural heritage. Rising sea levels endanger coastal sites throughout the Mediterranean, while urban expansion destroys archaeological deposits before they can be properly investigated. International cooperation between archaeological institutions has become essential for preserving and studying Phoenician heritage, while training local archaeologists to continue this work under challenging conditions. The integration of Phoenician studies with broader Mediterranean archaeology has revealed their civilization's central role in ancient cultural development. Rather than existing as an isolated culture, the Phoenicians emerged as crucial facilitators of cultural exchange and technological transmission that connected diverse civilizations across vast distances. Their legacy appears not only in specific artifacts and inscriptions, but in the fundamental structures of Mediterranean civilization that they helped create through centuries of commercial and cultural activity. The Phoenician achievement in creating the first truly international commercial network established patterns of cultural exchange and economic integration that would influence Mediterranean development for millennia. Their innovations in writing, navigation, manufacturing, and urban planning provided foundations for later civilizations, while their cultural synthesis traditions created models for managing diversity within complex societies. The ultimate measure of their historical significance lies not in territorial conquest or political dominance, but in their fundamental contributions to human civilization through the democratization of literacy, the facilitation of cultural exchange, and the creation of commercial practices that connected distant peoples in networks of mutual benefit and cultural enrichment. Modern understanding of Phoenician civilization continues to evolve as new archaeological discoveries and analytical techniques reveal previously unknown aspects of their culture and historical impact. Their legacy persists not only in the alphabetic writing systems used throughout much of the modern world, but in the fundamental concepts of international commerce, cultural synthesis, and urban civilization that they pioneered over 3 millennia ago. The Phoenicians ultimately succeeded not through military conquest, but through cultural innovation and commercial enterprise that created lasting foundations for Mediterranean civilization and established enduring models for cultural interaction in an interconnected world.